Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
Barry sat at his desk. Everything around him was exactly the same as usual. Nothing around him had changed, only his life, which could not return to normal. He always had some conflicts with his wife, some endless conflicts. They fought, made up, fought again, and the whole epic could go on forever. "You're very gloomy today," said a colleague, looking at him. "Yes, there are a lot of problems, so no wonder I'm in such a state," said the man, shaking his head negatively. Barry put his hands on the desk, putting his head down on his hands. He looked frustrated, and besides, he had plenty of reasons to lose his mood lately. The coworker who sat next to him patted him on the back. He didn't say anything at first, and then apparently, he realized that he couldn't help him morally. He decided not to push too hard. "Yeah, my wife and I fight all the time. Lately, she's turned into some kind of meter. I don't know what she wants. She always has some problems, conflicts, can't decide whether she needs me as a husband or not," said Barry, shrugging his shoulders. Lately, there were so many difficult cases, so many challenges, that he felt so frustrated that he didn't want to do anything. And instead of coming home, lying on the couch, relaxing, he had to endure constant attacks from his wife. She then talked about something that wants more money there, then wants him to spend more time at home, and such contradictions could accompany her just in any matter. "Well, you do not get upset. Just you have that right. Some crisis in the relationship so happens. I too, at one time with mine, so much quarreled that I thought that we already divorced. Well, as you can see, we're still together, and besides, we're good," said the co-worker, smiled, but the smile slowly slipped off his face. "If we were just fighting, it would be one thing, but we're fighting forever, like like we're strangers to each other," said Barry. "I sometimes feel like she has only one goal, just to drive me to the edge. That's it. It's like she's setting this whole thing up on purpose, and it's all just to come to some goal of her own. I do everything for the family. I do everything for her, and she always can't get enough. Maybe she's really right that it's time for us to get a divorce," Barry asked, shrugging his shoulders. Now it was his co-worker who was shrugging his shoulders. He couldn't give such advice. He couldn't afford to give advice that could ruin the family or affect it in any negative way. "Well, let's put it this way. You talk to her. Maybe you'll be fine. Really, what's the problem with just talking? Maybe she has some real grievances with you. Questions, maybe she wants to discuss something with you, and you are at work. Here I had that with my wife. We talked. We ended up discussing, and I got a little better. It's all good now. We have to talk to each other. There's no other way," said the man, smiled, and patted his colleague on the shoulder. Barry suddenly thought that he talked too much, but these conversations lead to absolutely nothing. Always some problem. Always she has some dissatisfaction. She was so tired of it. Barry was getting a little tired of it too. And he looked at her. Sometimes it seemed to him that he did not understand whether it was his wife, whether he did the right thing when he chose her. "I guess we do need to talk, but about whether we should get a divorce. But she doesn't want to talk about it. She wants me to figure it out right away. It's like I'm a magician. I don't know what she wants. Every day there's a new complaint. You think I'm married for the first day, and all I see is that she needs to break up with me as soon as possible. She's either got a lover or plans. She doesn't want to be with me. Here's a cross for you," said Barry, leaning back in his desk chair. "Even if you get divorced, will it really hit you that hard?" asked his colleague, and his question was inappropriate. In fact, Barry thought that the divorce would not hit him so hard, and in general, most likely, everything would be fine. Yes, he would be a little upset at first. There would be problems, but then gradually things would get better. Barry was smiling, looking as if he could make mountains out of everything. It was a different look from a couple minutes ago, and it was noticeable that he was having a hard time with this whole conversation. Barry sat at his desk, his co-worker sitting across from him. Periodically, they talked or laughed, and the chuckles seemed to become endless. Barry was a little distracted, and it helped him come to his senses. But look, what's to come is what's to go. You realize that if she wants a divorce, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't force a favor, as they say," said the colleague, shrugging his shoulders. "That's understandable. said Barry, waving it off, pretending to understand. It's just that I'm very tired. I want to come home and feel rested. You know how much work we have to do these days. I'm always in some sort of endless state of nervousness. All I do is clean up other people's messes. I came in yesterday, I said, let's have a little quiet time. And you know what she did, word for word. She made a scene. You see, she's not satisfied with my work. Barry snorted. I mean, I've worked hard for years. I've worked hard, and she's just not satisfied. I've been working towards my dream job for years. She just said she's not satisfied. If it's not hers, it's not hers. Barry was so indignant he didn't realize he'd overreached himself. He exhaled noisily and leaned back in his desk chair again. Joe, who was sitting across from him, had just smiled visibly. Now only his smile was a guilty one. He wouldn't have been able to tolerate such a thing himself. Yes, he and his wife had misunderstandings, but not like this at all. If his wife was throwing tantrums at home to get him to change the job he loved so much, she would very quickly stop being his wife. Okay, let's get to work, said the co-worker, smiling. Barry was in agreement. He pulled out the stack of cases he needed to review and felt there were no urges today. He smiled at his own thoughts. How long would he be sitting here? How long would it take him to get promoted? Of course, at this rate, if his wife kept pushing him, if she kept ruining his mood, he certainly wouldn't be able to do anything. And he needed to solve a case, needed to prove himself, otherwise he'd be stuck in this department. The biggest thing that frustrated Barry was being stuck here. He was already thinking that a divorce could solve this problem. He was running that thought through his head, hoping that it would be completely warm. As the saying goes, ready he would be able to make up his mind and be able to do whatever it took to not worry anymore. But once he remembered the first days they had, he couldn't give up on her anymore. He remembered how gentle, attentive, caring she had been. What had happened so much in attitude that she had turned into such a monster where he took a wrong turn? So today he approached the house, but he didn't feel like going in. He knew that as soon as he entered the apartment, again there would be endless problems. Again she would tell him how displeased she was. He walked up the stairs, entered the apartment, looked at his wife. She smiled at him. Casey looked like she was quite calm. She was chubby, pretty, very interesting. She had some kind of zest in her looks. She caught the eye. Barry remembered looking at her and instantly falling in love. He couldn't tear his gaze away. She was so beautiful, so wonderful. In fact, it was still like that. Maybe he had grown cold to her, why he had not considered the problem from this side. Maybe it was his fault that because of his work he could not in time trace where their love ended. And so, as he found himself back in the kitchen, showering, tidying himself up, he pondered over which one of them was more to blame for the relationship absolutely evaporating. He immediately thought back to his ex. Maybe he should have stayed in that relationship. Maybe he should have slowed down a little bit not to push Annabelle then. Hey, how's work going? She asked. She wanted to show interest, but it was obvious she wasn't interested at all. It's fine, just a lot of work. We've been under a lot of pressure lately, but I think it's for the best. Maybe we can really get a promotion. When he brought up the promotion again, she rolled her eyes. She didn't like it when he started talking like he was going to be in this job forever. She turned to him, crossing her arms over her chest. You think you really need a promotion in this job? That more killers, more thieves, but less time with your family is what you're dreaming of. Now it was Barry's turn to roll his eyes. He didn't like it when she started proving him wrong in his reasoning. She just wanted to prove to him that he should listen to her own reasoning, as if her opinion was the only one that made sense. By the way, she herself didn't work at all. Then why all this talk? And what do you want me to quit? To go handyman? He asked, trying to keep himself in control. And what do we have? Dispersal only from police officer to handyman. What? Business cannot open their own? Casey asked, crossing her arms over her chest. I think you have some kind of disease. What do you call a disease when a person sees only business in front of him and everything else as if it doesn't exist? I think it's called mercantilism, isn't it? I've worked my whole life to make myself comfortable. I've worked so hard to get to this position, and you're telling me I have to quit my job just to please you? Barry asked. He suddenly stretched, sniffing. I think it smacks of selfishness. Casey threw the rag down in anger. She couldn't stand it when he sneered like that. He looked at her, but didn't say anything. He looked annoyed. That meant only one thing, that she was going to reprimand him again. Well, I just want a normal, strong family, and I'm immediately selfish, so I want to go to the seaside at least once a year. Am I selfish? You are selfish that you deprive us of all this just to sit at your job and sit in your office, she said rather harshly. He felt that at times like this he was much more angry with her than before. The girl was silent, but Barry knew it was a temporary silence. Now she would think for a while, and then she would utter another pearl that he had heard a dozen times before. You never listened to me, by the way. Lucy's husband opened his own business and now they have money to spare. Why can't I have a nice life? Why should I sit and wait for life to get better while others live to the fullest? She was indignant. Again, comparisons began again. I couldn't stand that she started to put someone as an example again. Well, so maybe you can find another husband such as your Lucy. You will then sit together, discuss what your husbands are wonderful, opens its own business, beauty. He asked his wife unhappily, and she grimaced even more at his words. He didn't understand what she was missing. She didn't work. She was only occupied with herself. She had everything she asked for, and she wasn't satisfied with everything again. He was starting to get angry, and it seemed like he was doing everything for her, and she was just starting to screw him over even more. Casey had gone into the other room. He knew she was about to definitely pick up the phone, start calling her friend, and again they would have a conversation that consisted solely of discussing him as a terrible husband. But contrary to his notions, Casey came back into the kitchen, sat down across from him and defiantly took a deep breath in and then an exhale, as if she was overwhelmed with emotion she was trying to contain. "Do you want us to divorce you?" he asked, and she was taken aback. Apparently, she hadn't expected him to bring it up at all. She stared at him silently, her mouth slightly open in surprise, but she couldn't shake off her stupor. Barry realized he'd just caught her off guard. Maybe she wanted to use the divorce to threaten him, to use that damn manipulation again. Or maybe she wanted to pull it off on purpose to make him feel guilty. But he went all in. He brought up the divorce first. "What makes you think I need a divorce?" she asked, but it was clear from her voice that it was not what she wanted to talk about. "But you're acting like the last person in the world. You know how much I work, and yet you throw tantrums at me at home. You know how hard I worked to get this job. You knew it was my dream job, and every day you tyrannize me into quitting. Aren't you doing this so I'm the first one to talk about divorce? You're taking the burden of responsibility off of yourself, and then you're going to tell me how bad I am, and that's the end of it." When the key turned in the lock, he knew right away it was Casey's mother coming in. He hated it when she showed up unannounced, hated it when she always showed up and started acting like she was in her own house. But Casey had given her the keys herself, apparently wanting her mom to be there for her. Their conversation stopped temporarily. You could see by the look on Casey's face that she was relieved about it. Apparently, she wanted to put it off until she could come up with some new excuse, or until she decided to talk to him herself about the divorce or the fact that she wanted a completely different life. When the older woman entered the apartment, her face was disgruntled. She looked at her daughter, clucked her tongue, and said that she was always unhappy with everything here, and that she obviously didn't want to talk about it right now. "You have a heavy energy here. You always have it like this, as if I don't come here is always bad energy, as if you fight every day," said the older woman, entering the kitchen. "Nanny, why did you come here?" Barry asked. He didn't know how to get the woman out of his own apartment. "I came to check on my daughter, and I can't check on my daughter, or do I have to ask permission every time? That's a lot of hospitality you got here, that's for sure. That's why you always have money problems, because you don't make guests happy," said the old woman. Barry just got up and went into the bedroom. He didn't want to talk to her now. He didn't want to say anything. He was so tired of the constant complaints that he didn't want to talk to his wife or her mother. He didn't want again to listen to how bad he was, how wonderful she was. Thank you. He already listens to it all the time from his wife, and now he had to listen to it from her mother. Why is he going off the rails again? The woman asked her daughter. It's a work problem. I have his work is already in my liver, and why the hell does he cling to it so much, clinging to this job, as if there is no other? Casey said in a disgruntled voice. She tried to keep her voice down, knowing that loud talking would be heard in the bedroom, but apparently her mother wasn't stopping that. Look, come on, your family. You, a woman, should act wisely, somehow adjust to him. I mean, really, anyone would run away if they had to be brainwashed around the clock. You grew up just like your father, and you never realized that this will not lead to good. The old woman only shook her head negatively. She looked at her daughter, hoping she'd get the message, but Casey only snorted. She certainly wasn't going to adjust to her husband, at least not now that he was making such a big deal out of things she wasn't happy with. Look, Casey, if he leaves you, you'll be biting your elbows, said the old woman. Mom, you make it sound like he's the only man in the world, said Casey, looking at her mother with a tired look. Fool, think what you're saying. He works, he doesn't drink, he doesn't go out with friends, he doesn't go out with women, he's a good man. Why are you turning your nose up? Asked the old woman. You can't find such a man nowadays. Some men work, others drink, and the third one does just as well. Casey looked at her mother, but there was more judgment than understanding in her gaze. Casey certainly didn't think so. She had her own way of looking at things, and she scoffed at her mother's desire for her to be involved in family reconciliations as much as possible. Casey, for her part, felt that her husband should be the first to go to the reconciliation. She, like a girl, should sit and wait for him to take the initiative. Look, Katia, it'll be too late. You won't be able to do anything. He's a good man. He'll be ripped off. You shouldn't treat him like that. Well, he works at this job. What now? If you don't have enough money, try to get a job yourself first, her mother said in a disgruntled voice. She knew very well that her daughter didn't want to work. You've got a good job. Your man provides for you from head to toe, doesn't drive you to work, and you turn your nose up at the fact that you're not satisfied with his work. Casey sat down across from her mother and took her hands. She looked her mother in the eye. Mom, you don't understand. You're at that age. But I don't know how you don't understand. I want a different life. I'm tired. I'm always at home and I can't afford anything. My girlfriends live a different life. I go to the mall and buy whatever I want. I went to the salon, changed my hairstyle, and grew my hair. I went to the salon and bought myself a new cell phone or an expensive necklace, said the girl, rolling her eyes. I also want to afford everything. Look at me. I'm young, beautiful. I can have it all. And instead, I'm just sitting around, waiting for things to get better, for him to decide I'm worthy of this new life, you see, said Casey. The mother looked at her daughter with undisguised doubt, as if she was trying to figure out if her daughter meant what she said, or if she was just pretending once again that she was the princess and the rest of us should indulge her whims. Family's supposed to be about family, not money. But since you're so smart, go ahead and sit on some man who'll provide for you. And what do you think you'll be happy in this golden cage? No, my dear, life is very complicated. You need to choose a man with whom you can walk through life by the hand, with whom you are not afraid, who will always be near, who will not deceive and will not betray. You have such a wonderful husband. I would sell my soul for such a man, but you do nothing but complain, said the mother. Banging her fist on the table, she suddenly took out her keys and put them on the table. The woman got up and walked towards the exit. The daughter watched her mother's actions carefully, but she wasn't going to stop her. If she wanted to leave, let her leave, and when the woman left, there was total silence in the apartment. Casey took a full breath. Finally, her mother was gone. The next day when Barry arrived at work, he was in such a broken mood that words were hard to convey. He was upset not only after his conversation with his wife, but after everything he had heard. He hadn't closed the door. The bedroom had heard perfectly well the conversation between Casey and Nanny. He was glad the older woman had finally left the keys to the apartment, but he could see that there was little to stop his wife anymore. Apparently, Casey was going to look for a suitable suitor who would be worthy of her understanding, who could give her everything, provide for her from head to toe, and make no demands in return. Barry on call, said the tall woman, pointing toward the car. Sydney, what a call. I don't go on calls anymore, said Barry, and a strange smile appeared on his face. On the one hand, he realized that he was contradicting his superiors, but on the other hand, He felt a kind of pleasure that he was no longer in that position when he had to be on call around the clock. "Did I make you an offer? Let's make it quick." A neighbor complains that her stepfather is beating a little girl and she's screaming like she's being murdered. "We don't have people here, and it looks like the girl doesn't have time to wait. The car is already parked," quickly said the supervisor. Barry did not argue. He and his colleague went down the stairs and got into the car, and they drove to the call. "From the look on your face, the situation in your house has not gotten any better," the colleague said, looking at him with a look of disappointment rather than support. He hoped that after talking to him, the friend would finally talk to his wife. Maybe they could find common ground, could get a little closer to a solution. But compromise was too far away. "Yesterday, my mother-in-law came to visit. She kept saying that she was coming here because the energy here was bad, and my fool declared that she wanted a secure life. You see, she's not satisfied with my job. She doesn't work at all. I didn't say a word to her when she said she didn't want to work. I took extra shifts. I took the guys for training. Here you are. She wants more money. She is like that monster who eats and is not enough," he said, and felt a little ashamed of himself for talking about his wife like that. The friend only shook his head negatively. He knew that in such a situation it was unlikely that anything could be solved. It was already clear that it was unlikely that they would be able to change this situation they had in the slightest. And besides, it was unlikely that his wife would be willing to reconcile. Usually, if a woman began to press exclusively in the direction of money, then nothing could not be changed. You have to separate, break up, look for new people with whom you could build a relationship. Always gives me an example of the husbands of her friends. Well, if they are so wonderful, let her introduce a man, let him provide her from head to toe as she wants. Then why is she clinging to me? What am I? A win-win while she's looking for someone better. Barry was indignant, not understanding how he could tolerate such an attitude. "Barry, I'm always in favor of family. I'm always in favor of people making up, finding some words to make up with each other. But I think you're in a hell of a situation here. You can't prove anything to her," said the friend, shrugging his shoulders. "I don't think I can prove anything to her. I have to accept that she wants a divorce, so the hell with it, then we'll divorce. I even specifically told her yesterday that if she wants a divorce, we will divorce her. She looked at me like an idiot, as if I'd suggested some supernatural thing. Then her mother came in and we never got to talk," he said when they were already approaching the nearest village. The driver turned right, and they were just approaching the very house where the conflict had taken place. Only the man's screaming was heard. A woman stood nearby and peered into the house, seeing nothing. Barry checked to see if a weapon was nearby, got out of the car, and entered the house first. Arriving at the call, the policeman saved the little girl from her violent stepfather. But when he looked up and saw a picture of the girl's mom holding her in her arms, he was stunned. "What the hell?" said Barry, then swore pretty hard. He started swearing. Tears came to his eyes, and he was so overexcited he was almost crying. Everyone around him looked at him with a confusion of what was going on, and only he himself knew who the girl was and who the woman in the picture was. It was Annabelle, his ex. It was as if it hadn't been years since they had broken up. Everything spun around. Everyone became all about their own business. The girl, who was immediately in the car, the stepfather was twisted rather abruptly. He looked like a man who didn't realize what was going on around him at all, shouting, waving his arms, saying that she had gotten what she deserved, as if it made any difference at all, especially when it came to corporal punishment for a small child who couldn't stand up to him and couldn't do anything in response. Barry hated it when he saw people who suddenly thought that if someone was physically weaker, then it was okay to bully them, to physically punish them just because the person couldn't fight back. And when it came to a child, things got even worse, and patience simply disappeared. "Here," said Joe with unconcealed anger, watching the girl's stepfather. "Nothing. We'll sit in the monkey house for a while, then we'll talk. I can't stand such people who think they can do anything. Nothing. We'll take off the beatings, put the girl in some orphanage, and no more beatings." He was clearly determined. He looked at his partner, but he could not see anything, as if he was looking at an empty place. "Well, we got to get to the station. or we'll be stuck here until all the villagers get here," said Joe. Went off in the car. Barry followed him. There was complete silence as they drove to the station. By the time they had dealt with the girl's stepfather, a car had managed to pull up, so they put the girl in one car and their perpetrator in another. The girl sat quietly in a special seat, looking at her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. Almost arrived at the station, as the girl was immediately taken away by a psychologist. They waited for the social worker so they could talk about taking a statement later. Joe wanted to ask his partner what had happened that had knocked him out, but he didn't dare to ask such a question. However, his curiosity was so intense that it was literally already written all over his face. Barry did not want to say anything. He was completely immersed in his own thoughts and so upset that he could not utter a word. The boss was running from office to office, discussing something, saying something. They were waiting for the social services to arrive, and Barry knew that as soon as the social services arrived, the girl would be taken away, and he couldn't let that happen. Barry, entering the supervisor's office, looked at her with appeal. She stared back at him as if she didn't understand what he needed right now. Of course, as a person, as a mother, she was glad the girl had escaped such a fate. But as a police officer, she knew very well that cases involving children were usually very nuanced and hard to resolve. She already looked tired, but she knew she had a lot of work ahead of her. "Barry, what do you want?" "You better wait for social services. We need to take a statement from the girl. I don't know what else there was. It's scary to imagine what she could have gone through with a freak like that. We've already established the mother's dead, so the girl's in his care. And then what will happen to her?" he asked, staring at the supervisor blankly. She put aside her pen, raised her head, looked at him in response. "What will happen to her?" "Well, she'll be sent to an orphanage. Hardly anyone will adopt her. You don't usually get adopted after a crime like that," said the woman, but what Barry said next threw her off balance. "Maybe you won't put her in an orphanage. I think that's my daughter," said the police officer, and when Barry saw his boss, completely confused, staring at him with even more surprise, he realized he couldn't prove anything to her anymore. "So wait, let's go over this with you in order," she said, putting the pen away again, apparently hoping that now she would finally understand everything. She took a deep breath, exhaled, staring at him, as if that could solve anything. "You went on a call, saved the girl, jackhammered her stepfather, and now you're telling me it's your daughter." You could tell by the look on the supervisor's face that she had already stopped realizing what was going on altogether. She looked at him doubtfully, and there was no more doubt in her eyes about his sanity than there was about the truth of what he was saying. "It's long to explain, but I've seen pictures of her mother, and I had a story like this, so I'm sure she's my daughter," he said more insistently. "I can't just hand her over to social services. You realize I'll never forgive myself for finding her and losing her again." The situation spiraled even more. It felt as if they were in some cheap soap opera, not quite in real life and not at all in real life, where the problems were over the roof and without such sweet stories. The woman who sat at the table looked at her ward and did not understand why he was making such a big fuss, for it did not look like the truth. She pretended as if she hadn't heard him at all. You'd think that solved the problem somehow. He just walked out of the office and went to wait for child welfare. And when a tall, fat woman with red slits arrived, he immediately realized who she was. This woman had an Rosny look. The feeling was as if she was a giantess, large, ugly, with evil eyes. And as soon as she entered the room where the girl was sitting, the little girl immediately cried. "We need to know where they're taking her," said Barry. Joe, who was standing nearby, immediately stared at him. He had no idea why his friend would want to know where the girl was being taken. "But so, I'll call and tell him more like a shelter at the hospital, at least for the time being." "Okay, we need to get her in as soon as possible so she can calm down a bit, come to her senses. I hope you didn't organize any interrogations here without a social worker, without a psychologist, because you know me. If I find out that you violated her rights, you'll be in trouble," said the woman, threatening them with her fist. But then she smiled, because she knew very well that no one here would do such a thing. Too often she was here, taking other children. "Come on, you guys, I'll write everything down. I'll let you know, I'll call you." "Why do you need to know?" "I need to take a DNA test," he said, still looking at the woman. Now Joe was staring at Barry, not knowing what was going on, but Barry wasn't going to say anything now. He didn't care. The woman, who was already used to all sorts of things, only nodded. Of course, Barry. Let's agree that the doctor must come not in a white coat to take the damn test, because I don't want the girl to be afraid of doctors because of what happened to her. Okay, we gotta go because she's scared of me, said the woman. She suddenly leaned over the girl, said a few words to her. The girl gradually calmed down. This big menacing woman turned from an evil giant into a kind fairy. It felt as if an embittered mask had been applied just so that no one would ask any questions. I don't know what happened here, but I hope that the freak who hurt her will be punished, said the woman as she put the girl in the car. Barry walked them to the car, looked at the girl, who looked just like Annabelle, and couldn't believe his own eyes. It was too scary to realize that she was his daughter. Don't you think it's time to tell me what's going on? Joe asked, stepping out to his partner and friend, but Barry only shook his head negatively. He didn't want to say anything right now. Now was not the time. He went back to his workplace and continued to do his work, but the more he worked, the more he tried to distract himself. The more he thought about the girl who would now go to the orphanage and whom he would not be able to help. Everything inside was clenching with regret. He couldn't help it. It was all too scary. Was he really the father? Had she not had an abortion then? Or maybe he was nothing to this girl at all. There was no decision to be made. It was necessary to find out everything properly first. The girl was taken, but no one was hiding her. When the results were in, he could go to court. He could prove that she was his daughter, and then it seemed he could take her home. Except that the talk of home immediately spoiled his mood. Barry, barely out of the car, walked slowly toward the apartment. How was he supposed to tell his wife about this? And how could she in her right mind accept a child from another woman, and it was already perfectly clear that she was not going to accept anyone? She couldn't deal with him, and she couldn't deal with another woman's baby. You're even more upset than before, and I told you this job wouldn't do you any good, said Casey. She sounded serious, as if she'd give a lot for him to stop thinking about work right now. It was written all over her face that she was preparing for a completely different conversation right now. And now that she was standing right across from him, it seemed like the perfect way for him to break up with her right now. Look, I was once very much in love. It was a sick relationship. She and I broke up, but a few months later I saw her and realized she was pregnant. I tried to talk to her, but it was impossible, and the timing was right, more than right. I looked for her afterward, but I couldn't find her. I knew I had a kid somewhere, but unfortunately I couldn't find her. Said and blurted it all out literally in one breath. The woman looked at him and didn't understand why the hell she even had to listen to all this. Her face first became pale, and then so flushed that he was taken aback. So anyway, I was on a call today. When I got there, I rescued a little girl from a violent stepfather, but I saw a picture of Annabelle on her wall. That's definitely her. That's her baby, he said. Casey dropped the mug. The hot coffee that was inside the mug spilled out, the beautiful porcelain mug with blue monkeys cracked, and she, watching his actions, could not believe that this was her man speaking, that she was watching her husband tell her how he had a child on the side. Casey didn't know what to say to him. In a situation like this, few people in general would know how to act. Even if she was given a good 100 options, she never imagined she'd ever be in a situation like this. Wait, let me get this straight. Are you telling me that you have a baby out there somewhere? Casey asked, staring at him as if he was the only one who could answer that question. Yes, and I saw her today. She's a carbon copy of Annabelle. I'd already been told where she is, and I'll be doing a DNA test. No, wait, what the hell is a DNA test? Are you crazy? Do you realize what you're up against? You're going to have child support hanging on you, and you're going to have to pay until someone adopts her. And that not only do we not have enough of that money, we won't have any more money because you see, decided to play father. She was about to scream, and he could see that no matter how hard he tried now, he would not be able to change her mind. Apparently, she had her own opinion about the situation, and she wasn't going to budge from it. You don't understand. I don't just want to take the papers and then pay child support. I want to take the girl if she's my daughter. I want to raise her. For years, I've been looking for her. She was right here in the neighboring village. Who would have thought it? Can you imagine? He asked, and immediately a radiant smile appeared on his face. Casey looked at her husband and didn't understand why he suddenly looked so happy. She had never noticed anything happy or cheerful about the situation. She couldn't believe that when he found out he had a child, he was just pretending as if he was fine with everything. She was so angry with him, so eager for him to do something, to be explained to, that she just wanted to make him regret what he'd said. If you bring another woman's baby in here, you can be sure I'll leave you. She admitted every word as she spoke. Her voice was stern, and it was clear that she wasn't joking, and he realized that this was no time for jokes. Are you out of your mind? Do you hear yourself? You're telling me that you slept with some woman and there's living proof that you slept with someone. You want to bring me here a baby that was abandoned by its mother? Casey exclaimed in surprise. She didn't give her up. I found out later that Annabelle died. The baby was left to her stepfather, and as you can see, it didn't end well for the baby. Besides, as a woman, you have to understand, wouldn't you want your child to have a father? He asked, looking at his wife with surprise, but Casey looked at him with completely distraught eyes. You idiot. Of course I'd want my child to have a father, but I wouldn't give birth to a goddamn man who'd run the hell away. Jesus, don't you realize this whole thing is just a divorce? She screamed, and now he realized that he wouldn't tell her anything, wouldn't explain anything. She was so furious now that it was as if she had no control over the whole thing. Casey paced all over the kitchen, not realizing how she could even hear this from her man. In her mind, it was as if she was a stranger here, as if she was talking to her brother, who you see was telling her how screwed up his family life was. But no, in front of her was her husband, who wanted to pin the baby from his past relationship on her and apparently wanted her to silently eat it all up, but she wasn't going to do that. So this is the last time I'm going to say this. I'm not going to say anything again later, she said, raising her palms. She made that gesture every time she wanted him to shut up. If you bring your last woman's baby in here, I won't even be here. Before you know it, I'll be packing up my stuff, leaving, filing for divorce. If you think I'm gonna put up with that from you, you're dead wrong. Casey spoke clearly, trying to mint every word, clearly going to prove to him in practice that he was wrong. But Barry realized at work that he couldn't prove anything to her. He'd known she'd say that, so he wasn't surprised. Casey wanted to make him emotional, to hear that he was wrong, but he said nothing, just got up, left the table, and did not have dinner with her. More than one day passed while the situation unfolded in all its glory. And somehow Barry arrived at work. His relationship with his wife was literally falling apart before his eyes. He no longer hoped that he could reconcile with her, but he looked quite disappointed. He did not understand how to prove to his wife that she was wrong, that the child should be with a real parent, with a real father, and not in an orphanage. It seemed that Casey was willing to choose the lesser of two evils. He'd rather have him pay child support than bring home a girl, but he knew she wouldn't agree to that either. When Barry arrived at work, his boss took him by the arm and dragged him into her office. It didn't escape the others that he was getting special treatment today. So right now you tell me everything, and if I realize it's all worth it, I'll help you figure it out. Until then, I don't know how to react to any of this. How the hell am I supposed to know that you decided to do a DNA test on a girl we just recently rescued? The supervisor asked. Barry didn't think at all that all this would fall on the boss's shoulders. Somehow it had all gone over his head. Now, being in the office, he realized that the situation was escalating. He thought he could do everything to bypass his work, but since the girl was involved in the case, it all came out in one continuous scandal. I could tell by the look on the boss's face that she wasn't happy. I'm asking you again, why the hell do I know the very last thing you're going to do is a DNA test? How the hell do you even know this girl has anything to do with you? Asked the supervisor, completely confused, not realizing that this situation was far more serious than it appeared at first glance. Barry took a deep breath. He would have to confess he simply had no other choice. Otherwise, he has to tell at least everything in general terms. I used to date a girl. I wanted to marry her. She was my fiancée. She accepted my proposal. But at the last minute, she just backed out. She just said she wasn't ready for marriage and decided I wasn't the person she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Barry told me honestly, trying not to miss any particularly poignant points. You know, it's not uncommon. Just why the hell would you take a girl back to your place? And this Grunwald asked the boss, who clearly couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to know what the problem was. I saw her a few months later. She had a pregnant belly, but you'd have to be an idiot not to realize it was my baby. The due date was right, but by the time I found out, it was too late. You see, she decided she didn't want to be with me, so she ran away. I knew I had a baby growing somewhere. I looked for her, but it turned out she was dead. I got to the call, rescued the girl, and I saw there were pictures of Annabelle on the wall. That's my kid, you know. Except the supervisor didn't understand him. She pulled out papers, looked through them. He knew those papers had nothing to do with him. Apparently, she was trying to distract herself for at least a couple seconds to free herself from the information he had told her here. I don't understand why you think it's your child. We've already found out that the child has an aunt. She's on her way to us. She'll be here soon. What makes you think it's yours? Jesus, Barry, you're the reason we're in so much trouble here, and I'm talking to you like you're a kid. He looked at her and knew why she was angry. Probably if he were in her shoes, he'd be angry too. Their department had had enough problems lately, and now he'd added more. They had once been equal colleagues, but she had solved a pretty high-profile case and had gotten a promotion. When she got the promotion, she got tougher every day, more and more serious. All right, get out of here. Wait for this woman to get here. Oh God, I forgot her name. Sydney. Oh, her namesake it was. She said and sat down on the table. She looked upset, broken, very unhappy, apparently so tired that she didn't want to say or do anything at all. Look, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of problems on all sides, and here comes an opportunity, as if I could finally find some meaning, find a family. He said almost in a whisper, looking at his boss. Okay, I'm sorry, I understand how important it is to you, that you can't even imagine how many problems we have because of it. The department called, said we're taking advantage. All right, well, I'll figure it out somehow. Jesus, Barry, if I'd known how much trouble this job was in, I'd never have moved up the ladder. Take my advice, get out of this job, it's no good, she said. He looked at her and realized that she was already squeezed like a lemon. She had tears in her eyes, and it was immediately obvious that she was struggling to overcome all these endless problems. If it turns out she's your daughter, you'll have to pay child support. If you want to take her, you'll have to go through the courts, and trust me, it's unlikely any court will give the child to you. With a job like that, no one's gonna give you the baby. You're literally tied to the workplace. One step to the left, one step to the right, you're a runaway, she said. He knew what she was talking about, but he tried not to think about it. Have you talked to your wife about it? She asked, looking at him carefully, apparently trying to figure out whether he would lie to her or not. But he wasn't going to lie to her, especially since they were back on a first-name basis, as they had been a long time ago. It was as if there was no longer this social gulf between them. She doesn't want anything, says she'll divorce me if I bring home another woman's baby, he said, shaking his head negatively. Okay, we'll figure something out. I pretty much got it all sorted out, so if anything, we've done a DNA test to see if you're involved or not. You understand me? I'm hoping there won't be any more questions, so basically, you can relax a little bit. But I strongly advise you to look at other jobs. I don't understand why the hell I had to go with this promotion, she asked and then looked at her former partner. Look, Barry, my advice to you is, if you find out this girl is your own, don't take her right away. You don't know what she's been through, and you don't know what her disabilities are. Just observe her. Just take note that you might have a daughter. Go see her, visit her, give her gifts, socialize, but don't go to extremes. He heard her, but he wasn't going to take her advice. Whatever the little girl's problems, he had to try to connect with her, had to at least try to be a real father to her, a decent, involved one. As he left the office, Joe also approached him. He wanted to know what was going on, and since Barry had told his boss everything, he had told his partner, but he had added a lot more details. And when Joe heard all this, he was shocked. He could not believe that all this could be happening right here, right now, in front of his eyes. especially since it seemed to him that they had no secrets from each other. But it turned out they did. I never thought that you have a child somewhere, and at that we will see her purely by chance. Oh, by the way, Sydney's here, Annabelle's sister. Maybe you could talk to her. Joe asked. Except Barry didn't know if it was the right decision to talk to Sydney right now. They'd never had a normal relationship. She hadn't liked him to begin with, except they'd been separated for a long time, and if the child had a father, why couldn't the father be given to her? How was an aunt better than a birth father? Barry walked over to the office where Sydney now sat waiting for the custody officer. He looked out the window, saw her sitting on the phone. Sydney looked confused. Barry's memory flashed back to the times they fought, almost to the point of a fight. If it had been up to him, he would never have discussed anything with her. He didn't want to see her. He wanted it all to go away and be behind him forever. But still, plucking up courage, he entered the study. When she looked up at him, she almost didn't recognize him at first. She squinted and then opened her mouth in surprise. "Barry, what the hell are you doing here?" The girl exclaimed in surprise, unable to take her eyes off him. "I had the same question for you," he said, hoping that she would soften and answer it herself. "I came to pick up my niece. What are you doing here? How did they even find you? That they called you here? Is this some kind of confrontation?" Sydney asked incredulously, looking around meticulously as if searching for a camera. He took a deep breath, exhaling, wanting to yell at her now. She was pretty jumpy. She could snap into a scream at any moment, at least she used to. But it had been 4 years now. Maybe she's changed. "I'm the one who works here. I'm the one who came to the call, rescued her, and recognized her. There was a picture of Annabelle on the wall, and I knew right away it was my baby." She smiled stupidly. She looked at him strangely, like he was the local jester. There were contradictory feelings mixed in her gaze. On the one hand, she was looking at him as if trying to understand what he wanted, and on the other, she was clearly mocking him. "Barry, I'm sorry, but what makes you think it's your baby?" she asked in surprise. "I've been seeing her for a long time, and when I saw her pregnant, it hadn't been that long since we'd broken up. The timing fits, and I remember her telling me she wanted a baby. She even said in front of you that she was ready to raise a child on her own, just to have one," he said, shrugging his shoulders. She looked at him doubtfully, Sydney, as if she wanted to say something to him and couldn't at the same time. He saw doubt in her eyes, fear of some sort, a strange feeling that she couldn't express. He really regretted that they hadn't had a normal relationship with her. Maybe now he would have had a chance to talk to her, but she immediately took everything in stride. Sydney was a person who was all about black or white. The rest didn't matter. "Let's not get into an argument over nothing right now." "All right," said Sydney, and her face looked guilty. "My sister wasn't exactly a model. I realized she had a lot of problems. I also realized that she was pretty seriously upset when you two broke up. But trust me, she didn't grieve for too long when she found out you left so easily. I don't know what she was trying to accomplish. Maybe she wanted you to bring her back. Maybe she wanted you to come to her again, to propose to her again. I don't know. They say good things about the dead or nothing," said Sydney. She fell silent, but he didn't interrupt her. She needed time to confess everything, and he wanted to give her as much time as she needed. "Look, my sister's head was a mess. If it was up to me, I'd have kicked her to the curb. I didn't love you. I didn't like you. But compared to the men she had, believe me, you were better than all of them put together. Yeah, I had a temper too. I realize now that I shouldn't have tried so hard to get you two to fight. I'm not arguing that it took less than 6 months from the time you broke up to the birth. But trust me, it's not your baby." He didn't understand how she could be so sure, but she looked at him quite calmly. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe she wasn't the flighty hysteric she used to be. "It's not your baby. Just trust me, it's not your kid. My sister's had her share of suitors, and believe me, she's not as picky as I'd like her to be. Forgive her and move on. It's not your problem," said Sydney. There was silence. Sydney was staring at the table. Apparently, it was hard for her to talk about her sister, much less say such things. She looked at Barry and shook her head negatively and just apparently wanted to reassure him somehow. After all, Who knows what feelings he was going through right now and how hard it was for him to listen to all of this. Barry, I know it's been hard for you and me to talk. I also understand that you're not really in the middle of anything right now. I know you and I have had a very difficult relationship. Maybe if you and I hadn't fought so much before, we'd have a more productive dialogue right now. You think I'm saying this on purpose to take your baby away from you? If it were up to me, I wouldn't have taken her at all. I don't even know her. Sydney was honest. She stopped talking again, took a deep breath, exhaled, and leaned back in her chair. He placed the chair next to her. Apparently, she didn't want to speak too loudly, and who knows what secret she was trying to keep. She had more than one lover. While you were together, she would come to me, telling me how she found more and more fools who, you see, promised her golden mountains. She and I fought about it all the time, and when she got together with some idiot who saw nothing beyond his own nose in prison after you, we broke up. I knew how hard her life was. I knew how bad it was for her, but she never once asked me for help, and I never offered to help her. And you blame yourself for that? He asked, looking closely into her eyes. Now he was trying to figure out whether she was lying to him or not. Honestly, she was old enough to make her own decisions. It wasn't like I could follow her around all the time, wiping her snot. She decided she wanted to go around with men, decided this one was much better than a serious man. If she made that decision, let her deal with the consequences herself. But when I found out she was dead, I knew it was all a setup. She said, "Wait, what are you saying?" Barry didn't know anything about how his ex-girlfriend died. He must have gotten so lost in the case that he didn't even bother to look up the cause of death. It became embarrassing that her sister knew more than, even though he was the one on the police force. When I arrived, I was told she had suffered a cardiac arrest, but I'm sure she did it all on her own. Apparently, she decided she'd made too many mistakes in her life. I just don't know what she was thinking when she left her child to this man who was hardly human. But did she want to kill herself? If you think back to their past together, Annabelle had never even thought about it, never even stuttered. She really loved life, made plans, everything she had, as if she had planned for a dozen years ahead. The last few years she had changed completely. The last time we talked to her, she kept saying that she wanted to change her life, that she was not satisfied with everything. I offered her to move in with me, but since we were fighting, she refused. I found out just a few days later that she was gone. I tried to get the baby right away, but no one would give it to me. The very stepfather, who is now facing imprisonment, was sure that he could give this girl everything. Nobody would even listen to me. Who would listen to an aunt who had nothing to do with the girl? Sydney was silent. He understood her, but it was as if he was ignoring her words. Yes, and she could see for herself that he was still in shock at the news that everything was a setup. Believe me, it's not your baby. You can do a DNA test. But trust me, Barry, it'll come back negative. There's no way you're gonna find the father of that baby right now. I don't think she even knew who got her pregnant," said Sydney. "My sister thought that when she got pregnant, when she had a baby, it would be an incentive for her to change her life completely. But she was still very quickly back to where she started. When Barry's social worker walked in, she had to get out. He was standing in the hallway, watching Sydney's face change carefully. Sydney was clearly not happy about having to pick up the girl now. It was good, of course, that she had agreed to take her niece after all, but there was no joy in her face. The DNA test he had done was about to show its result by now, but in the meantime the girl would be attached to her aunt. Barry felt hurt, disappointed, some unpleasant feeling inside. Had he lived with his beloved for so many years and lived in deceit? Had she cheated on him and now he would have to deal with the consequences of her betrayal? Barry stepped back and now just watched from the sidelines. He needed to calm down immediately, because otherwise he would get so worked up that he wouldn't be able to let this situation go. "Holy shit," said Joe. When Barry told him about everything now, he could only tell his colleague, because he was sure that he would never tell anyone anything. "You've got a whole Brazilian soap opera going on here," Joe exclaimed. "I'd give a lot not to have anything like that. You know, it's been years, but it still makes me sick to my stomach to feel like I've been cheated on. I've lived in deception for so many years, I didn't even realize I was just a lucky break for her." He sat in silence. Joe put his arm around his shoulder. He didn't know how to support his friend, because in this situation it was hardly possible to support a friend, to calm him down properly, to give him exactly the kind of support that a colleague and a friend counted on. You know, there are some men who absolutely do not care about their women. They force them to have children, tie them to themselves, and then don't let them go, he said. And there are women who cheat on their husbands, looking for a more lucrative place to live happily and not see any problems in this life. But there are other people, you know? He understood what Joe was saying. His friend and colleague wanted to say that life didn't end here and that all people were different, that he would meet someone who would be close to him spiritually, who wouldn't shit on his soul. Sydney came out of the office with the social worker. She was holding some papers in her hands. Her face was upset. She didn't even look around. Apparently, she didn't expect Barry to still be sitting there. He hadn't even called her himself. She didn't care, literally had it written all over her face. Sydney exchanged a few words with some other staff member and followed the social worker. She would probably now be called to the orphanage where she would meet the girl, or maybe she would be sent to the hospital where she was lying. No one had given Barry the details. Now he didn't pass as someone who had anything to do with the case. Talking to Sydney had knocked him out of it a little. It was as if Barry couldn't hear what was going on around him. It was as if he was in prostration. Thoughts were blending together into some one unceasing stream. His head was fully loaded. Sometimes it seemed to him that several 24 hours had passed since the conversation. In fact, only a few hours had passed. He was so deeply immersed in the memories of this past that there was no way he could give them up. There just seemed to be no end to these memories. Here he meets Annabelle. Here he embraces her. Here he swears his love to her. Here he arranges a romantic evening, gets down on one knee, asks for her hand in marriage. She rejoices, claps her hands, throws herself around his neck. And here she stands and says she's not ready for married life. Her pregnant belly, the accusations that she doesn't want to be with him, it's all been some kind of one nightmare. Don't you think you're getting a little too loaded? Joe asked. They were all getting ready to go home. Barry walked to his car, looked in the direction of his coworker, his partner. I guess I didn't think enough before, and now I've decided to take it all in one fell swoop, he said with a smile. He said with a smile, as if that could justify it. Don't worry too much. It'll all work itself out. I always say, if you can't solve a problem, let the problem solve itself, said Joe, who didn't know how to support his friend, because after such news it was unlikely that any support would be appropriate. On the one hand, Barry felt resentment, pain, desire to understand the situation. On the other hand, he felt disappointed that he had trusted a man he shouldn't have trusted at all. When he arrived home, he saw his wife. However, he was ready to fight her back at once because he did not want to start this endless conversation where he was wrong about everything. We need to talk, she said, walking him into the kitchen, except Barry didn't want to talk. He nodded and went into the bathroom. He stood in the shower stall, turned on the water, and listened only to the sound of the water. In these moments, he was getting at least a second of relief. Everything was too complicated. Would he really be able to make a decision right now? Would he really take it? Divorce her if she now said she didn't want to continue a relationship with him anymore? On the other hand, he did want to take his daughter home after all, and his wife clearly didn't want to let anyone else into his life. Are you coming soon? She asked impatiently. She knocked on the bathroom door. He answered her that he would be out soon. He didn't understand her impatience, and besides, he didn't want to deal with the situation right now. He had enough problems to deal with right away. She suddenly wanted to burst into his bathroom, not even letting him shower in peace. Why that situation made him angry. In another situation, he wouldn't have even paid attention to it. But now for some reason he felt uncomfortable, as if she had taken away his only opportunity to be alone with himself and his thoughts. Look, let me take a quiet shower, and then I'll come out and we'll talk. Okay, I had a really hard day. Give me a chance to just exhale, he said grudgingly. He heard her immediately step aside. It was clear that she was offended by him, but he didn't care. If she wants to be offended, let her be offended. He was tired of indulging her whims. It was hard to bear the constant arguments every time. Don't you think your work is ruining our relationship? She asked through the door, And that was too much. Barry turned off the water. He stepped out, slowly wiped himself with a towel, changed into his homemade sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt. Under that tank top, even his broad shoulders seemed less imposing. When he came out, she took a few steps back. She looked very serious, but her lower lip quivered. Her lip always quivered when she pretended as if it wasn't a big deal while she barely had the patience not to yell at him and nothing. "I'm shocked at you, of course. Could you wait? I was working like a damn man today, and today in general, I lived half my life at work, and you, instead of holding your tongue, just to wait, interrogated me under the bathroom door. And if I'd been in the bathroom, you'd have come to interrogate me too." Casey abruptly turned in one place and went into the kitchen, making it clear that she was going to talk to him, but she wasn't happy with the conditions there. Barry rolled his eyes and thought that maybe divorce wasn't the worst option, especially since she was slowly losing it and it was getting harder and harder to communicate with her every time. "Look, we need to talk to you once and for all. I don't want to replay this situation every time and expect that you and I can still have a future together," she said. "Go ahead. Tell me how you don't like me. I'm screwing up your life, right? You want to live beautifully with some man for the sake of money, and I, such a lousy guy, do not give you. Yes," he said, making his voice as childish as possible. "Stop clowning around." He waved her away because he knew she was going to start yelling. He didn't want to listen to hysterics and yelling again, but apparently he had no other option at all. "You don't understand. If you don't love your woman, someone else will. I should have told you we were splitting up, but you don't listen to anyone but yourself, and you can't do that. You think I'm going to wait forever while you work your damn job and wait for a promotion?" She screamed, and he realized that things were only going to get worse from here. "You don't have to wait. You can turn around right now. Go your man. You said all your girlfriends have husbands who are so wonderful, providing for them from head to toe, working up a sweat so your girlfriend can buy a new cell phone. Really? Well, then go find yourself a man like that or beat your friend off. Judging by your new values, it doesn't make any difference to you. Okay, I'm tired. I don't want to talk about anything right now. I'm tired of you, of this situation, and in general, all this is stressing me out," said the man. She stared at him as if he had cursed her. Apparently, she thought that after this conversation he would come to his senses and do what was good for her. But after that conversation, she realized only one thing, that he no longer valued their relationship. "What have you decided about the baby?" she asked, hoping that at least here she would not be disappointed, but he already knew that the answer would not satisfy her. "I've already done the DNA test. If it proves that she is my daughter, I'll take her home and that's it," he said, adopting a tone that did not tolerate objections. She was still staring at him, but it was obvious that she was barely holding back from throwing a tantrum out of nowhere, because she didn't understand at all at what point he had decided he had the right to ignore her own requests completely. "So between me and some girl you just recognized, you're going to pick the girl? Do you really think being a single dad is better than being married to me?" I asked, surprised. Barry rolled his eyes. What kind of words did he have to explain to her for her to finally understand? Of course, Barry was no fool. He understood perfectly well what she was not happy with. She wants to hear that he'll do anything for her. He'll buy her everything, that he'll provide everything. She'll just enjoy life, oh well, and brag to her girlfriends. "Of course, you don't care about me at all. You treat me as if I were a stranger to you," she said in a hurt voice. "And you make me quit the job I love. You make me give up my own daughter. You give me a headache every day. You threaten me every day that you will leave if I do not act exclusively according to your rules. And after all that, you're telling me I don't love you. I treat you like you're a stranger," he asked. The argument was strong, and she could not counter it. It was immediately clear that she was confused, and that confusion made her uncomfortable. She went off to pack her things. She must have hoped that he would come back, that he would make her stop. But since he didn't follow her, she went into the kitchen herself. This was really starting to feel like an endless soap opera. "Okay, I need to think. I'll stay a couple more days. If I decide to leave, I'll leave and you can't stop me," she said, cocking her head. "I won't stop you. I'm really tired of you. You don't want to be with me. It doesn't suit you in every way, but the hell with you. It's not my problem." I've done everything I can to make you happy in this relationship, but you've decided that it's not enough for you, that you need a bigger peace. So look for your peace somewhere else." His words shocked her even more. She stared at him, unable to believe that he had said such things to her, and how she could fight with him after that and still be right. She retreated to the bathroom, sobbing as loud as she could. And here was another manipulation that didn't end in anything. Here came the calls to her friend, her mother. Everything was the same. A few days later, Barry arrived at the station and never saw his wife during that time. She went to her mother, decided to think away from him, apparently decided that while she was at a distance, it would be easier to make a decision. Barry felt the most genuine peace for the first time in a long time, while his wife had been away so long. But now he was called to the office to hear the results. When he arrived, he was immediately met by a co-worker who wanted to come along with him. He wanted to support him, wanted to give him a chance to feel a strong, friendly shoulder. After all, in such a situation, it was scary to be alone. "You, the main thing. Do not worry in any case. Everything will be fine, you'll see. If she is your daughter, well then we will try to make sure that you establish a relationship with her. And if she's not your daughter, well at least you saved her life and maybe saved her future," said Joe. A very skinny, petite girl was standing just outside his office, waiting for him to approach. When she saw him, jumped up on the spot, handed him an envelope. He signed, and she left. When he entered the office with Joe, Barry immediately opened the envelope. He cast his eyes downward. He was not the girl's father. A silence hung inside. It felt as if he couldn't help himself. First a wave of anger rose, then a wave of fear, resentment, frustration. After all, Sydney was right. He had absolutely nothing to do with this girl. But he still had a desire to see the girl one last time before Sydney just took her away to a whole new town where the girl would have a new life. "Look, but it's not that bad. Your wife said she didn't want you to bring the girl home." But you could hear the doubt in his words, and it was clear that the doubt was more from ignorance of the situation. Joe didn't understand how anyone could stop a man from bringing home his own child. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to call Sydney, arrange to meet with the girl and herself, say goodbye to them one more time, and then I'll deal with my own life. I'm so tired, to be honest. I don't know if I should take a vacation and go somewhere, just to feel that everything is back in place," said Barry. Barry could hardly stand it when the day was coming to an end. He'd already called Sydney. Turns out he called her just in time. She wanted him to drive up, and she'd set aside a time to pick up the girl to fit him in. By the time he pulled up to the shelter, the girl was already sitting in Sydney's car. She saw him and waved both arms at him, happy to see the man who had saved her. "Look, I warned you. I'm really sorry about what happened, but it can't be helped. That's the kind of sister I had," said Sydney as he handed her the sheet that contained the results of the DNA test. Barry remained silent. This time he waited for her to speak again, because she was obviously going to keep talking to him. She looked at him with regret, but it was obvious that she felt guilty about her sister's behavior. She'd always been like that since high school. "I'm sorry you had to deal with it, but I really don't understand how you could believe her from the beginning. She's always been the kind of person who can't keep herself in her own pants. I'm sorry that you fell in love with her and that it had those consequences. But even though she was a complicated person, I think deep down she loved you. Maybe she blamed herself for breaking up with you until the very end." "Did you decide to take her after all?" he asked. "My own niece. I have no choice. My conscience will not allow me to leave her in an orphanage and live in peace. I'm sorry for what happened, but I certainly can't just blow it all up. I should be so much wiser than my sister. But sometimes I think I'd rather be like my sister." He looked at her in disbelief, but Sydney immediately went on talking so he would know what she meant. "No worries, no worries, no worries. You only think about yourself," she said, shrugging her shoulders. She'd gotten herself into so much trouble, so much debt. It's a blessing that it can all be settled through the courts. "Okay, we really have to go. Is there anything else you want to tell me?" Sydney looked him straight in the eye, but Barry couldn't stand it and looked away. It was hard to talk to her, hard to ask the question he was afraid to hear the answer to. A grown man, a serious man, caught a lot of criminals, and he was afraid to just ask a question. Tell me honestly, who is her father? He asked quietly, apparently wanting the girl not to hear anything. A strange expression immediately appeared on Sydney's face. He realized what she was feeling inside right now. Apparently, she really knew the answer to that question, but either she didn't want to tell him now, or she just didn't want to admit it. Are you sure you want to know the answer? She asked. He nodded. Sydney took him aside, looked once more at the girl who was turning the radio button on and off. When you were together, you had a friend, Tony. When you were at work, he'd come to your house and they'd have all kinds of fun there. I'm sorry you have to hear all this, but I'm so guessing he's the father, because she didn't have anyone else afterward, and it was just him and you for almost a month before that. So the timing is basically just him. But knowing my sister, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was some other man there at all, said Sydney. The upset got even worse. Not only was she cheating on him, but the betrayer was his best friend at the time. Barry felt like he was being crushed by the press, but tried to keep his face, as they say, to at least pretend for a little while that he could handle the information. Okay, we should say goodbye, said Sydney, forcing a smile out of himself. He said goodbye to Sister Annabelle. Barry walked over to the little girl, shook her hand firmly, handed her a candy bar he had bought on the way. She thanked him for saving her and was now clapping her hands happily that right now she was going on a trip because, as it turned out, she really liked to ride in a car. As they drove away, Barry was left standing in one place. On his right-hand side was the orphanage, and there, ahead of him, a distant car. There sat the very girl he wanted to take home. It felt as if his past was now one continuous black pit. It was hard for him, painful, but he realized that he couldn't do otherwise. He had to take the girl in if she was to turn out to be his daughter. He walked slowly towards his car to drive home. His thoughts turned into one continuous lump. He wanted to stop at some bar, drink himself into a stupor and not worry about anything else, because he was so tired, and the tiredness was so heavy. Barry thought that when he got home he would go straight to bed and not think about anything else. So much unpleasantness had happened in the last few weeks that he could barely pull it all off in his head. Turns out Annabelle hadn't just cheated on him, she cheated on him with his best friend. And he and Tony were firm friends, literally spending all their free time together. Barry then thought that he was very lucky to have a friend who was like a brother to him. But it turned out that fate provided him not a brother, not a soulmate, and the most real trap. Memories surfaced in his head and disappeared again, like ghosts of the past. He wanted to go to the grave, to do anything to talk to her, to pretend he was talking to her. He felt such anger at her, while feeling frustration towards himself, because he couldn't do anything about it either. He walked home. His mind was a mess. He tried to keep himself in control, to keep his sanity at least a little bit. "Why are you divorced?" the neighbor asked. Her voice snapped him out of his reverie. Barry was just remembering that conversation with his ex, where she was standing there holding a small pregnant belly and he was trying to find out from her whether he had anything to do with the baby or not. "What, you deaf motherfucker, I'm asking you, are you divorced? Your wife was leaving here today with her things," said the neighbor. "Well, apparently she divorced me, because I don't even know yet that she packed her things and left." The neighbor stared at him, surprised at the calmness with which he was saying all this. She picked up his friend and immediately took her aside. "Barry, can I help you with something? You look so lost, like you're sick. Don't you worry. So your wife left you and you don't even know it?" she asked, a little confused. "To be honest, we haven't been getting along well lately, so I'm not surprised she packed up all of her things and left. She'll be looking for a rich suitor, and I don't have anything to do with good men these days. You see, I don't earn enough to keep our princess happy." "What a fool, Casey. Oh my God, did you really leave him?" the neighbor asked. "Oh, go with God, Barry. You're scary to look at. You've got no face." She let him go, saying she'd listen to him anytime. She followed him with a glance until the man's large silhouette disappeared into the entryway. Apparently, she realized how hard it was for him and didn't want to rub his already open wounds. When he entered the house, the place was empty. The emptiness was unnatural. She'd purposely chosen a day when he was working late and figured she'd have time to pack her things and move out quickly. Who knows if she went to her mother or decided to find some man on the side. So much for marriage for life. said the man aloud as he looked around the apartment. She hadn't just packed up her stuff. She had made a pretty serious mess. He began to slowly pack up his things to tidy up the apartment because he didn't like living like this. He wasn't an ardent fan of cleanliness, but the obvious mess annoyed him too, especially now. He wanted peace of mind, coziness, to be in peace and quiet, not to think about the fact that his beloved is unknown where she is now. While he put the apartment in order, he felt better and better. When he woke up the next day with the full realization that his wife was no longer around, that she had packed her things, that she would never come back, he was relieved. If marriage is always like this, he certainly didn't want any new relationship. Joe was right. People are different. They shouldn't all be lumped together. But in this broken state, he didn't need any new relationships right now. When the doorbell rang, he was almost certain it was his ex-wife. She left 2 pairs of shoes that had ended up under the bed. He pulled them out, put them right by the door for her to come in and pick up. But when the door opened, he saw her mother. The old woman was crumpled on the threshold, looking at him with the hope that he would let her in, that he would not ask any unnecessary questions, and she would be able to talk to him normally, not as they usually did. "You let me in, I give you my word not to raise my voice, not to insist. I'd really like to talk to you, just like a human being. We're not strangers to each other, right?" Nanny asked, and Nanny looked like a person who was ready for absolutely any compromise. He let her into the apartment, trusting her promise, because she always kept her promises, unlike her daughter. When she entered the kitchen, she immediately began to put the kettle on. She started the dough for pancakes. Apparently, she decided to do some good so that he would not kick her out early. He realized it at once and did not say anything to her. If the old woman thought it would be better, so be it. Besides, he wouldn't refuse her pancakes. She looked at him with regret. "We both know exactly why I'm here, don't we?" said Nanny. But she didn't wait for an answer to her question. She looked at him as if he was her last hope. "I know as a mother-in-law, of course I'm not a gift, but I'm not a bad person. I've always wanted only the best for my children. I was raised in the family tradition that family is the most important thing. From the very childhood, I taught them that they should keep their family safe, that there is nothing more important than a close person near them who will always give a helping hand and to whom you will give a helping hand." She stopped talking, removed 1 pancake, immediately put the second pan to bake on 2 at once. "It was faster that way. But I don't understand where or what I did wrong. I don't understand why all of a sudden she chose a golden calf instead of a family, why she chose a golden cage instead of the comfort of home, love, and care. But you are the only person who can talk sense into her, and the only person she will listen to if you can make your position clear to her," said the older woman, and now she waited for him to respond. Enough time had passed since the last conversation with Casey that Barry remembered perfectly well. He hadn't counted on having to talk to her again at all, but he couldn't tell this older woman that he would be much better off without her daughter. "I won't prove anything to her. She drank my blood day in and day out, telling me that she didn't have enough money, that I should open a business. Every day it went on, I could hardly stand it anymore. It was only a matter of time before we broke up. She needs money. She needs friends with good husbands. She needs another life where everyone around her will idolize her." The older woman looked at him with such pain in her eyes that his insides clenched. His own mother had been dead for a long time. That look, he remembered, the look of a worried mother who can do absolutely nothing to help her child she loves so much. Here was Nanny who loved Casey, her daughter, her golden girl, so very much, but there was nothing she could do to help her. She watched Casey at full speed trying to drive off the good road, all just to try her luck at a richer life. "Don't get me wrong, I'm just a working man. Yes, the position is good, yes, the pay is good, but she can't get enough. You see, she needs me to bring home almost $1 million, to buy everything for her at the snap of her fingers. I can't give her that kind of life, and I can't listen to her every day that I'm bad. I realize you raised her differently, but as people get older, they raise themselves. She wants a different life. Let her realize in this other life as she pleases," he said, raising his palms as if to show that he did not intend to do anything and that she had come here for nothing. When the woman had already put a full stack of pancakes in front of him, she looked straight into his eyes. She took his hands in hers, realizing that she had no more reason to stay here. She couldn't just sit here and talk to him forever just to get him to reconcile with his daughter. Barry, she'll be lost without you. She's a good girl. She's lost her way. You help her. I'll help you. I'll talk to her. Maybe she'll realize she was wrong. You fit together like two pieces of a mosaic. You're like two cakes for one cake. She said such sweet things that he smiled. Except Barry realized that they were no longer two cakes, but rather he was a shawarma on a wedding cake that was about to become the centerpiece of the celebration. He couldn't say anything till his mother knew there was nothing more he could do, that he couldn't change her mind. By the time Nanny left the apartment, she had just thanked him for listening to her. Apparently, she realized it was useless to ask him. She picked up her shoes and just went downstairs. He called her a cab to take her home comfortably because he didn't want to send an elderly person on a bus. Whatever this woman was, she had never wished him harm. Here, he didn't want anything of the sort. He stayed in the kitchen, smelling the amazing aroma of homemade pancakes. He smiled to himself. It even occurred to him that he probably missed too much in this life. He needed to relax. He needed to learn to move on with his life. He had a divorce ahead of him, a bunch of problems, more and probably would still be problems when he wanted to finally get a promotion. It was all much better than the complete unknown that had been just a few days ago. At the divorce, Casey arrived already with a new suitor. She smiled at her husband, who was about to become her ex. He didn't care who she came with. He didn't care anymore. If she wanted to show off like that or hurt him, it didn't help because he had very different priorities right now. He was facing a promotion soon. He was glad that his hands had finally gotten around to an interesting endeavor that had taken him completely over. In his free time, he was making repairs in his apartment. He could be happy that everything was gradually getting back to normal. Yes, from the outside, it seemed that his life was gradually destroying, but for him, it was all for the best. What already? Probably. Bite your elbows, you lost me. Casey asked with burning eyes, as if she hoped that his words would help her feel more beautiful, more desirable. Why should I bite my elbows? All I've lost is endless tantrums every day, and I think I can live without them, he said, shrugging his shoulders. Casey pulled back, not understanding why he wasn't giving in under her onslaught again. She bit her lip, signing the necessary paperwork. The next time she spoke to him was when he was on his way out. You're going to regret not stopping me, she said, cocking her head. Apparently, she was bursting with pride. So be it, but only in your head, he said. Then he just walked away to his car. He got a promotion. Just a couple months later, he was on TV, had an article published, and was offered a move to the capital, to a new position. He was perfectly happy. When Barry finally met Nancy, he realized what true love is when it's mutual. When Casey was never able to build a relationship with her new suitor, even though he suited her financially, he made demands on her that she didn't want to fulfill, and she ended up getting pregnant by him. He didn't want the child at all. She tried to reconcile with Barry, came to his workplace, but found out that he got not only a new position, but also on the accumulated funds, bought an apartment in Washington, D.C., lives there with his new bride. Casey was furious, but more angry only at herself for missing out on a man who truly loved her sincerely and accepted her for who she was. The old woman sat uncomfortably at the kitchen table with her knees resting on the door. She was spooning fragrant tea with a spoon and trying to remember the dream in which she had woken up. It was not immediately successful, but suddenly remembered the gentle face, and immediately remembered that she dreamed as if she had given birth to a son, rejoiced over him, wrapped in diapers. The woman looked at the boy and tried to answer herself the question of how it happened that she was alone and there was no one else around. She drank a little tea out of habit and liked it to be hot, to give her the warmth with which she could resist the cold. Although it was the very beginning of spring, leaves were just appearing. The day was sunny. Suddenly the phone rang. From the sudden sharp sound, she even flinched. She went over, picked up the phone, and heard an unfamiliar female voice. "Hello, would you please call Karen?" "I'm listening to you," the woman replied. "The correspondent of the regional TV station RTV Lois is here to talk to you." Routinely, the woman said her pseudonym. "I know who you were, that you were undeservedly imprisoned, but now you have been acquitted. Would you agree to meet me and tell me about your experiences?" The woman felt her heart ache in the moment. She struggled to squeeze out of herself. Who would be interested? People should know the truth, that you suffered innocently, and we have no right to forget the terrible past that you people of the older generation experienced, so that it does not repeat itself again with pathos, answered the young voice. What and how I will tell you, it ran through the woman's mind as she listened to the journalist. Why rake up the past? She'd had enough. Heart attack. We'll have to call an ambulance. Are you listening to me? Yes, I can hear you. Can you tell me when and where we can meet? You know, I don't feel well, the woman complained, wanting to postpone the meeting. I know how to lift your spirits, you'll see, said the girl. Let's not postpone. Come to my studio in the 7th office. I ordered a pass, he's already at the gate. Today is such a wonderful day. The sun is just dazzling. And if you can't, maybe I can come over. How convenient. Run in, what can I do with you? Unexpectedly for herself, the woman agreed. What time would be better, so we don't run into each other? Come by in about 2 hours, I'll be waiting. Thank you very much. See you later. The woman hung up the phone and sat down on the sofa. She looked around the room in confusion and said to herself, Here you Karen and a dream in the hand, girl. Surprise Ah threw into the heat. It was when she was young that she wanted to be a model for everyone, to be in the newspapers, on TV, with awards ringing out. I wanted to be famous. Yes, it turned out the other way around, humiliation, prison. I didn't like that kind of fame. And yet they remembered me, but thank you for that. But why should my weary heart make such a fuss? It's nothing but idle worry that I'll tell the truth about myself. What truth? Who can understand it? My whole life is broken because I wanted to love and be loved, to have a family and children. Or is that a crime? However, judging by the way this girl was in a hurry to sort out my case, she won't. She doesn't have time for that. A program on television requires speed. People are willing to believe the most incredible myths, and few people are interested in the soul. I've done nothing criminal. In the meantime, I've really been victimized. Today, it's not so important what I sacrificed my youth for, especially since you can't tell the whole life. To some green and naive journalist, now I'm a martyr. That's the bitter truth. And if they want to understand me, sympathize with me, what's there to be afraid of? I'll tell you something. Let her listen. I need to take your blood pressure. It's getting bad. Oh, my nerves, my poor nerves. Koja Lois came with a cameraman. He stood in front of Karen with his camera. The journalist took out the microphones. He looked inquisitive, waiting for the woman to gather her thoughts. I'm a man of a different generation. You could probably be my granddaughter. You look just fine. Lois, a year in, a year out. What's the difference? Let's have a human conversation. I'll answer the questions, satisfy your curiosity. How can we talk about this? Some criminals have lied to you about an innocent man, made you a criminal, and you'll bear and carry your grudge. I've forgiven everyone. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived. It's my destiny. I understand, but scoundrels should know that lies must be answered for. If they've slung mud at someone, at least let their mud return to them after many years. All criminal deeds will be exposed. I would not like to mention their names for the simple reason that maybe some of them are no longer alive. You know, you don't speak ill of the dead, and if the others. We're not judges, Karen. My program won't hurt anyone. Just tell us about yourself at that critical time. The reporter asked. Crazy. It was very painful and difficult for me if I have children or grandchildren. They don't have to answer for the sins of their fathers in grandtime. That I, a young obsession with the desire to work, to serve the motherland, was in prison. I worked for the FSB. I was a special agent. And then my own people were crucified for nothing, and how unbearable it was after I got out of prison. I was cut out of my life. I couldn't get a job. I was rejected everywhere. Tears came to the woman's eyes and she wiped them away. And maybe only now Lois noticed the wrinkled, dry skin on her hands. Please don't worry, it's all gone now. I thought you could look at that time from the outside and not be upset. It's a wound that doesn't heal. The past doesn't go away, it's always with us. You know what? Let me make you some tea. I'm used to it in London, to warm my soul with this drink. I guess that's the only way we're gonna have this conversation. I'd be grateful, the journalist replied, and with her usual smile, the hostess looked at her and said, You must have a lot of fans." Lois was a little embarrassed. "And if I have any, they are not the kind of people I might like." "And what do you do with those who are particularly annoying?" "I send them away," she answered easily. "And if it is the boss?" "I pretend not to see anything." "And you're not afraid of losing your job?" "And journalist is not a position, but only black everyday work. You're a lucky character." "Lucky your husband." "I'm not married." "How old are you, if it's no secret?" "I'm in my 30s. "I was almost the same age then." The woman smiled and went into the kitchen. The journalist looked at the figure of the hostess, still quite slender from the back, and one could not say that the woman was in her 80s. There are such people with an indomitable spirit. No matter how life bends them, no matter how you spin it, but they continue to exist and enjoy every day. Even this room shows it. "Eric, please take a picture of the room," while she's ordering the cameraman. The huge full-wall closet was filled with books, mostly classics. A vase with flowers, Chris, 2 armchairs, and a round table. Not a single superfluous thing, not like some old people who clutter their apartments with miscellaneous junk. On one of the bookshelves, Lois noticed a picture of the landlady where she was still quite young. Beautiful face, curly, short hair. A stern look. "I wish I could get her to talk. I might get some interesting material. At least none of my colleagues has ever taken up the subject of rehabilitation after prison," Lois thought. A girl could knock a person off balance in some random way. If she shuts down, you won't get anything out of her. You have to be very careful how you choose your questions. Or maybe, on the contrary, ask specifically about what interests me. Why am I sitting there like at a birthday party? Maybe I need help. The journalist looked into the kitchen and asked, "Do you need labor?" "Everything is ready. Lois, get the cups and I'll get the cookies." The aromatic tea broke the tension a little. The sun was smiling through the window. Bread into the sweet hot liquid from the cups. Discreetly looked at each other. "You even have cups for Minds of London," said Lois. "Yes, I brought this service from there." I looked at the young picture. "You are so beautiful, young. Everyone is beautiful." The hostess replied condescendingly. "Tell me, were you beaten at interrogations?" "No, not beaten, but they didn't let me sleep." "What do you mean?" "They interrogated me at night and did not allow me to lie down on the bed during the day." "How did you stand it?" Lois asked sympathetically. The woman lowered her eyes, looked at the contents of her cup, and spoke softly. "I had nothing to confess, though. I accepted the terms of the game, agreed to all the charges. I signed some papers, and I was left alone until the trial, at which I was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and then taken to Siberia. That's the whole story." Karen looked Lois in the eyes, as if checking if she believed what she said, and she calmed down. The journalist, not showing any distrust, began to write something down in her notebook. And then she asked, "How was it for you there?" "Hard," sighed the old woman. "At first, they sent me to the logging camp. Frosts of 40 degrees, or fall slush, or summer heat and bites. No escape. The torments are hellish. Women didn't last more than 4 years there. What saved me was that I knew how to sew. A year later, I found a job in a sewing workshop. It wasn't easy there either, but I worked indoors, not in the cold. When they found out that I used to sew, they started to open their outfits and sometimes gave me something tasty. That's how I survived." "What were you locked up for?" Lois asked her big question. "I still can't understand why some employee of ours saw in my love note to one man my tendency to spy. I never thought that I, who had been awarded 2 medals and a service medal, would be imprisoned." Lois pushed aside her teacup and began to take quick notes. The moment had come when, it seemed to the journalist, the woman was talking. Now all that was left was to intelligently ask question after question. "Have you fallen in love with someone?" "I did, but he turned out to be married. What did I see in him? It was just crazy. His wife was jealous. My letter to him was intercepted. She denounced me to the authorities. Anyway, there's a price to pay for everything." The woman waved her hands. On her face was written repentance, like a sinner who regretted her deed. "I see. And where did you work after prison?" "I got a job in the library of an orphanage. I had no children of my own. I gave all my love to those orphans, and they wrote me letters from all over the country." "And you never married?" "I was married, but my husband was also an ex-convict. He didn't want children. His health was poor. He was convinced that two old convicts can't give birth to a healthy child. And of course, I felt he didn't have many years to live. He lived only 12 years after prison, and one day he died quietly in his sleep. His heart stopped, and yet nothing in my soul had changed towards his homeland. And what would you like? I want to go back to my youth again. Wait, I'll show you some London pictures. I've got lots of them. Lois sat at Karen's house until dark, looking at the photographs and listening to her talk about life in the camp, about London nature and the people there. She woke up when the landlady came up and turned on the light. "Oh, I've taken up so much of your time. Excuse me, please, as soon as the material is released. I'll be sure to call," Lois realized. "Maybe you don't have to show me," said the hostess. "You should. Thank you for everything." Suddenly, she leaned over and kissed the old woman on the cheek as if she were someone close to her. Lois breathed in the evening air with pleasure, filled with the smell of the first young leaves. How many times she had promised herself that next spring she would take a vacation and watch the trees blossom and bloom this summer. Would keep a diary recording every detail, every shift in nature, but these promises remained unfulfilled. As always, some problems and things were imposed, and then came summer, when she wanted to go somewhere to the sea or at least to the lake, not to sit in the stifling city. Walking along the road, she remembered her happy accident, which turned her life upside down. The girl was from a poor family. Her mother did not tell anything about herself. She worked 2 jobs and only once said that she could become rich if she did not refuse a famous man. Her father died in the service when she was still a child. Her daughter had no memory of him. Lois wore out her mother's dresses, but showed a lot of diligence in her studies. Contrary to logic, the girl went to the Institute of Culture to study television, radio, and journalism. It was possible to enter the institute only for a lot of money or by blat. Seeing her, the dean suddenly turned pale, clutched his heart, and whispered barely audible, "Lily, how are you here? How is it that the years have not taken you? I'm Loy, and Lily's my mom." The dean took the papers and looked at them. A tear rolled down his wrinkle and down his cheek. "Daughter, so you're my daughter." That day, Lois persuaded her mother to tell her the truth, but she waved it away, sighed, avoided any conversation. With difficulty, Lois overpowered herself and went back to her father, who suddenly appeared, to find out the truth. It turned out that Lois came to the exams in the very dress in which her mother had met a professor at the institute. The affair was fast-paced, scintillating, but short. Suddenly after the proposal, Lois's mother ran away, went into hiding. As it turned out, then she was married and gave birth to a daughter from a lover. The dean only found out about it now, and then everything was like a fairy tale. The mother met her professor again. The old days came back. The daughter got a job at the institute. Everyone began to live together in a rich house. She studied at the institute, no doubt for free. She graduated with honors. Now Lois became a famous TV presenter. She searched for materials for her programs. I was walking down the road after a shoot and frantically thought about what I'd show. The old lady's very friendly, nice looking, but I thought she left something out. Who of us is ready to tell the whole truth about ourselves? No one. We all have our sins and secrets. I'll show you what I have. It's not a documentary. It's just a story on a program to entertain the viewer. Lois reached her hand to a branch, plucked a few leaves, rubbed them in her fingers, inhaled the lively and healing smell of the first green. "Citizen, please show me your documents." Lois looked up in surprise and saw a young military man in front of her. He had 2 stars on his epaulettes. "Are we under curfew?" She was surprised. "My time," he laughed. "I've been watching you on TV for many years, and today I've been sitting outside this house all day, waiting for you to come out. And what were you doing there for so long?" "Did you do an interview?" "I did." "Why do I know you?" "We have." "I'm sorry, I can't remember where we met." "Sometime in our village. You interviewed my father. He was a combine harvester and I was his assistant. My first interview when I was in practice. Are you that boy?" "I would never have recognized you," said the journalist, giving a glance at the boy's slim figure. "You changed too. Even more handsome. I always followed you. I watch everything. Is following you an occupational disease?" Lois laughed. "It's not unknown. Let me walk you home. Walk you home if you feel like it. You don't know how much I'd like to, he replied, taking her under his arm. She looked surprised at his upturned profile under the visor of his cap and felt some strange peace and security. They walked side by side and were silent. I can't remember your name. Lois woke up. Otis. And Father Fred. No, Cress. Sclerosis is setting in, she laughed. Did you know I live in the neighborhood? You'll have transportation costs. I'm willing to go to the ends of the earth with you, the guy replied. Stops a cab. After getting into the car, Otis called her address. Lois looked at the guy in surprise. They drove only about 15 minutes, and during that time they didn't utter a single word. The shy cab driver only glanced at each other, studying their facial features. Otis had an unpleasant appearance that didn't stand out in any way. Gray eyes, rustic face, hair, short cropped guy like a guy. Getting out of the car, Lois said thank you. Yes, I would be ready to carry this load to death in my arms, said the guy. Who needs that kind of sacrifice? Lois laughed. A sacrifice in honor of the goddess of love, either in jest or in earnest, answered the guy. And how do you know my address? I work for the police. I see. Well, should I go? Said the girl, heading towards the hotel. That's okay. I have a chance to get an office apartment. I just need to get married. Do you have a fiancé yet? Asked Lois. I'd had one since the first time we met. I don't get it. Not all at once. Otis smiled. Shall we go to a cafe, sit down, or walk you home? Lois didn't like the fact that this boy suddenly burst into her life and tried to dispose of it as he pleased. My husband and children are waiting for me. Lois lied. You don't have to make up an alibi. I've got all the information I need on you. It's no coincidence that we met. I realize this is a surprise to you, but I had no other choice. I've been thinking about you all these years. She felt uncomfortable because she wasn't in the habit of lying, and also because this guy was younger than her. Let's meet in the morning, he said. Why? I have tomorrow off, and bring your passport with you. Why? And how will I check the citizen? You have to check something. Lois laughed, not so much because of her question, but because of the hidden subtext. Obligatory occupational disease, as you pointed out. All right, but prepare to talk about your parents' village life and your service. I'm not wasting my time. I'll tell you everything. They agreed on a time and place to meet. Otis kissed her hand goodbye. Lois took the elevator to the 7th floor, went to her room. She didn't feel like eating. The tea and treats had taken the edge off her appetite. She hung up her jacket and sat down at the table, started looking at her notes. She was about to sketch out a plan. Suddenly, she caught herself thinking of Otis and smiling. The boy's thinking, and she's completely out of inspiration, interfering with her work. That hasn't happened to me in a long time. What's gonna happen next? After the journalist's visit, Heron had a sleepless night. She lay in bed, turned on the light, started reading, but she couldn't shut out the intrusive memories. Figures of people from her distant past surrounded her, asking something, demanding something. Gradually, she became exhausted and no longer resisted, but began to talk to them, turning back the days of her youth. And she herself was surprised that she remembered everything from the past so vividly. At a time when she usually forgot things that had happened more recently, Sam came to her mind. He was the only one she loved in her life. He flew into the FSB from London, walking around in a brand new white half-fur coat, a furry hat, a black-eyed, handsome man. Since he headed the department, she is a liaison, and the secretary received a task from him, then to check the grouping of someone's lady of the heart, to scout out important information. Karen was willing to take any risk just to please him. It was the first time she had experienced such a strong feeling. Whereas before she had dressed without fail, now she drew herself up in a flowered dress, a fluffy fur coat. One day, when she flushed from the frost, happy from the anticipation of meeting her beloved, appeared in front of Sam. He said to her, "You're like a girl. You're like a girl who's already figured it out. Here, Sam, I plotted out the layout of this family's rooms. And this is their headquarters, like the council of the main ones. This is the entrance to the underground bunker. It's probably a storage room. No, tell me about it, my beautiful." Sam looked at her with undisguised admiration. I understand they have their own trucks that haul frozen carcasses. What's in them is up to you to verify. Well done. It's worth celebrating your accomplishments. Sam put a bottle of wine on the table, put the bread on, sliced the sausage. Sit down. Why are you standing there like a stranger? We've known each other for a month. It's a kind of anniversary, Sam said, pouring 2 cups and looking at Karen sideways. She didn't say anything. She just wanted to look into his eyes and listen to his voice. It was the greatest pleasure of all. Here's to you, Sam said, with one hand raising his glass, and with the other he put his arm around the girl's shoulders. To us, she said, and took a sip. Don't be shy. You're tired from the road, aren't you? No, I'm used to walking a lot. So, my legs don't hurt. He reached out and stroked her knee. They will. Don't, Sam, I'm shy. How old are you? Shy. As old as any of mine, Karen said. By country standards, she's overstayed her welcome. I think you're a pretty independent girl by now. Let's have another round, though. Sam poured himself another cup, shook his head disappointedly. What kind of worker are you if you don't drink? But let's drink to the motherland. Karen had to drink the whole cup for such a toast. To do otherwise would have meant treason, and immediately she felt a warm wave spread through her body. That's the way to do it. Sam complimented her. I won't drink anymore because I won't make it home. I'll eat you so sweet, Sam said. He put his arms around her neck and started kissing her. Karen responded to his kisses with tenderness and lovingly whispered sweet words. And there wasn't a happier person in the world right now than she was. We'll add everything and go to bed. You should get some rest. In a drunken voice, Sam said, for a night of love. Why just a night? I know there will be days, Karen said. But there's no time to do it during the day, smiled Sam. Here's to love. To love, said the girl. As Sam snacked and then cleared the table, she watched his movements and thought about how handsome he was. His curly hair, his eyes hid some secret of this former life that was unknown to her. How she wished she knew something about his past, to walk the paths his feet had touched, to be among the people who were near and dear to him, to share in his life all the past and future joys and hopes. And this seemed all the more impossible. Now she had to pack up and go home. Even though it was the dead of night, winter days are short, one would still get home at night. Better to go out now so before the blossom blooms you can reach your village. You will be my queen for one night, he solemnly proclaimed. Why one night, she asked. How long do you want it to be? 2, 3, for a lifetime. I love you very much. This kind of service has a very short lifespan. Here today, gone tomorrow. Nothing will happen to you. You don't go on missions by yourself. Karen replied calmly. Why do you reproach me? You think I'm lost in the business. Do you know how many liaisons I have like you? All of them should be given the task to reflect on the results, to develop strategies and tactics for further actions. Are you thinking about the work I'm doing? Yeah, I'm up 3 nights a night. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you at all. It may be over for the women, but the men will continue to catch criminals. I'll always love you and wait for you. I don't want always. I want you now. Categorically, he said, and wanted to hug Karen. She turned away and replied, I am a village girl. We don't have the habit of sleeping once. I must go now, farewell. The girl aimed for the door, but Sam put his arm around her shoulders. He held her back. But where are you going, you silly girl? I won't hurt you. We'll be fine, you'll see. I don't want your good, she said, pulling out of his embrace. I won't let you go anywhere. He held her hand. Sam, will you be mine? All of you. His hands were all over her breasts. I'll tell the commander tomorrow. You're drunk, and you don't know what you're doing. Karen suddenly seemed afraid of those drunken eyes and clinging hands. She was defending her dignity and at the same time loving him, so desirable and alien. You're not an agent, you're a spy. Sam muttered angrily. Tomorrow I'll write a report to have you suspended. He could barely stand on his feet and suddenly laughed, as if he imagined how she would be dismissed, investigated, and viciously rejoiced in it. Right now, how long do you hold a pencil? Karen replied wryly. She broke out, pushed his throat away, and got ready to leave. Snake of the swamp, she heard herself say, and quickly closed the door behind her. She ran, afraid Sam would rush to catch up with her. Winter. The sky was cloudy, a few stars peeking through. I thought he liked me. He's acting like that because he's drunk. But then I told myself that if he liked me, he'd see me again. He'll apologize for his insolence. What did he think of? I don't want a one-night stand. And fumbled with the cold iron of her gun and jokingly walked back the way she came. She was used to walking around with a gun. At least she wasn't afraid of meeting criminals. Later in meetings, Sam was with Karen, emphatically dry. All he talked about was business. Soon he rose through the ranks, went higher. Karen still did the necessary work. She was assigned as an agent. She didn't show her feelings either, though she thought a lot about Sam until she was finally convinced that he didn't love her. It was March 8th. The women decided to organize a small concert in the department. Karen also joined this group. The stage was a small area in the corridor in the offices. The girls were getting changed and fancy dressed. Karen stepped out to sing and suddenly saw Sam. He was standing next to Millie, talking to her, smiling and seemingly oblivious to what was going on around him. Karen didn't remember when she finished the song, how she hid, threw her coat over her shoulders, and hurried home with only one thought in her head. Why didn't I get sick that day? I shouldn't have sung. That girl was more cooperative. That's fate. My happiness is lost somewhere, can't find me. And I was ready to pray for Sam. Now Karen realized that Sam wasn't worthy of her bright love. But what can you do with your soul? When the mission was completed, immediately began to prepare a special operation to capture the criminal group. Karen was offered the position of department head. Of course, who else? How not her best agent of the special group was to take this responsible place? The girl with a dry and stern look supervised the work of the department and did not miss a chance to hit Sam for a living. The time was tense. A matter of national importance was looming. Armed men from among the deserters, prison escapees, were scrambling through the forests. Agents had to be sent into the thick of it to follow them, to find out what they were up to. Sam's wife soon arrived. Their relationship improved after that. Sam kept a close eye on her. Sometimes he'd tell her off. When he did, Karen let his taunts slide, and it probably would have been fine if it hadn't been for her longtime admirer, Alex. Ah, Alex. She had so hoped for his support, his courage, his understanding. The memories made her heart ache and her head hurt, and Karen stood up. She was thrown violently to the side. The woman sat up on the bed and reached her hand to the light switch. The light came on with a click. She glanced at the clock. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Looked in the kitchen for a pill, nitroglycerin. Put it under her tongue, measured her blood pressure with an uncomfortable tonometer, and was horrified. The arrow showed 160/100. What a dumb old fool got excited about the past. Fuck them all, she thought, pouring water from the kettle and taking a sleeping pill. That's it. No more memories or thoughts. Sleep, or tomorrow I'll be as green as a waterman. The woman went to the window, looked at the empty, dimly lit by streetlights, street. Raised her eyes upward, where the stars shone. The only sky never loses its beauty or grows old, the woman thought. One can stare at it endlessly and not look at it, but one should at least get some sleep. She lay in bed, sighed, and drifted off to sleep. Lois was late for her date, but she didn't hurry her steps, walking along the promenade. Peered at the calm smoothness of the river, which kept flowing this way and that, not stopping for a moment. Today, she had time to finish the program called Heroes without a name by lunchtime. I wonder how the director will take it. He's got a lot of problems too. Sometimes he'd sneak a bottle of 40-degree liquor out of the safe and apply it to relieve stress. Everyone has their own destiny. Lois saw Otis from afar, who was leaning on the concrete fence of the embankment, waved to him, saying, "Don't be angry that I'm late. I'm already here." The guy walked toward her. This time he was in civilian clothes, blue jeans, gray jacket, and black sneakers. He could have dressed more elegantly for a first date, Lois thought. A country kid, what can you take from him? Otis smiled happily. Lois admired this Hollywood smile and instead of greeting asked, "What are you happy about?" "Meeting." "Lois," he replied, pulling 3 purple roses from behind his back. He handed them to the girl. "Oh, you're so gallant, aren't you? I didn't expect that. It doesn't take much intelligence to give flowers. Do you have your passport? Are you going to check it?" Mockingly, she asked. I will. Give me your passport. It's a primitive joke to me. It's annoying, Lois said disappointedly. I'm not joking. Do you want to know my age? Asked the girl. I know your age, and it doesn't interest me at all. I made a date with you in front of the registry office. You understand? I just saw it now. Otis made a sweeping gesture with his hand. I'm inviting you to this palace to settle an important matter. Lois wrinkled his nose and said, Jesus, it's only the police who can classify a case like that. Do you have some relative working there who needs to be told about? No, I think it's time we apply to register the marriage. Marriage, Lois laughed. April 1 is long gone. Otis remained silent, waiting for her to calm down. Then he said excitedly, Lois, I'm sorry, I got off on the wrong foot. I'm offering you my hand and heart, or vice versa. I'm asking for your hand, whatever the book says. I don't remember exactly. Otis looked confused. He waited for her answer, looking into her eyes. She, too, was confused and didn't know what to say to him. Finally, she squeezed out of herself. Before taking such a step, you need to think carefully. I've been dreaming about it for years. I think we will not be signed immediately. Give time to think about it. So you'll have time to make up your mind. Come, I beg you. Let's go, she said sharply. But this is the first and last time I will indulge in your adventures. Remember that. Otis took Yulia under his arm. They went to the registry office, climbed the steps, entered a spacious hallway and then a small office where they were received by a polite woman. She handed out some forms, which Lois didn't even bother to read. Otis signed all the necessary papers himself. Lois followed him. None of this was quite right, but it was truly serious. She always liked to observe the life or work of others. Lois, the deed is done. I invite you to celebrate. Where? She asked indifferently. A cafe. There's one nearby. He took her hand, kissed it, and led her out. My general, aren't you taking on too much? I have no difficulty so far. The cafe. They were greeted by quiet music and a half-empty room. They sat down at a small round table covered with a white lace napkin. We'll drink champagne. We're having a party. We will. I suggest you choose the hors d'oeuvre. No, Lois said. I'm trusting your taste tonight. I'm afraid you won't be satisfied. My general is embarrassed. We know each other very little. So far, I don't know what dishes you like, but I hope to remedy that deficiency in time. Lois suddenly felt annoyed by Otis' pompousness, his desire to bend her to his will, so she asked. I didn't really understand what it was all about. I thought he said, and then he hesitated because a waitress came up at the same time. She wrote down the dishes Otis had asked her to prepare. Lois looked at the guy questioningly, wanting to hear the answer to her question. How did you realize yet that I love you? From the first time I met you. Do my feelings interest you? You'll see. I'll earn your love, Otis said eagerly. And you know that love, if you have it, requires no merit. She smiled with the look of a grown man looking at a foolish child. No more than you can imagine. I love you without knowing you, said he. What do you want to get married for? I want to never be apart. I want us to have children. I want everything that normal people have, or are those unresolved dreams. The waitress came with a bottle of champagne, deftly uncorked it, poured 2 flutes, and set out several plates of appetizers. Well, I'll be honest, we dream differently, but essentially the same thing, Lois replied, as if agreeing to what Otis had suggested. Karen waited for a call from Lois, but the girl did not respond for a week. Nothing I told her didn't work out with the journalist. I was either consoling her, or she was chastising herself. I don't need my name on the old gossip. And on the other hand, if the show had turned out the way I imagined it would, then let those who believed I was a socially dangerous element watch it. I had to come up with that definition. The rest of the world has never come up with such an absurdity, and everything is to make people realize that they are judged, not by a judge or a troika, but by the whole nation. Therefore, the punishment is correspondingly harsh. False, this world is impossible to live righteously because each regime demands to serve, manipulates people, forces them to transcend their principles for the sake of a common, far from humane goal. Smart people try to stay as far away from all these contrivances as possible. And I was drawn into the very epicenter of events. I was entwined between personal and public and state. My nerves couldn't take the strain. I was far from being a heroine, but only a weak woman who wanted to lean on a reliable male shoulder, to love, to raise children. Later, reading about different spies, I learned that they always waved away their personal lives in favor of ideas. If they had children, they'd put them in orphanages. And I didn't even dare to have a child. There's no soulmate around now. And don't mention it. I have a sister and nephews for my apartment, which they will inherit. Maybe they'll bury me, take me to my final resting place. The phone rang. The woman picked up the phone and heard her sister's voice. "How are you?" "I was just thinking about you. Listen, the program showed you so much about you that you're a heroine and a martyr. Was it good?" "It was good, too good. But why do you only talk about yourself?" "I served with you. I made the lists." "I'm sorry, Nellie, you can't tell me everything." "No, you're doing this on purpose to humiliate me. You don't have anyone to show off to, do you?" "I have children and grandchildren. You took all your medals and I got nothing. You've been in the group for 2 months and you're a hero for the rest of your life. Do you want to remember the past?" Karen asked. "Just so you know, how much fear we suffered because of you. That's why Mom died so young. How much she was nervous and cried when you went away for a few days with the bandits. You could have gotten me suspended." "No, you couldn't. I paid. Maybe we'd all have died because you left. Good thing Alex helped me out, told me you were living with him." "I didn't know Alex would say that." "Why would he? We were just friends. He loved you. And I'd only seen him twice since he was released. Where's he gone?" "He disappeared into the woods, shot somewhere in the swamps, never even buried. God, what a terrible death. He never spoke to me of love. What could he tell you when the whole neighborhood knew you were out with Sam and then John?" "Don't tell me about your gossip. I didn't make sense with Sergi. He was courting, and I turned him down. And as for the other, there was a purely business relationship. He was my immediate superior. You're all talk. This isn't a phone call." "Goodbye, Karen." Sat angrily on the couch and thought, "Oh, Alex, you're the only one who hasn't cheated on me in my life. Although, of course, I didn't respect you." Blinded by Sam, and then John put a veil over my eyes. "I should have given you the slightest hint of any need. You were always trying to make things easier for me." The last time she'd seen Alex suddenly came to mind. She was late for work then, and Alice was waiting for her outside the landlady's house where Karen was staying, separated from the tree that grew near the house. She was startled, and he reassured her. "It's me, Karen." "Is Alex missing somewhere?" "The farm." "Well, that's what it's all about. And you're still in charge?" "Alex, I'm tired of everything. What kind of boss am I? I'm going to school in 2 days, and then I don't know where I'm going. Everyone thinks John's promoting me. People say you're having a thing with him." "That's bullshit, Alex. You know me. They're just jealous of the guy who's with Oxy on Wednesdays and his family the rest of the time." "So you're with Sam?" "He's got a wife coming to visit, and he's been quiet. Nothing stops him. No family, no position. And they're passing Oxy around like a piece of property. God, I hate her." "Tell me about yourself. Alex, you're not married yet?" "I haven't met anyone like you yet." "I appreciate the compliment. Why are we standing here?" "Let's go to my place. We'll have tea." "Thank you. I'll just be a minute. My friends are waiting for me." Suddenly, Alex was in a hurry. "We'll see each other again." "But goodbye." He shook her hand goodbye and disappeared into the darkness. Only now the woman paid attention to the words Alex had said then. "I've never met anyone like you." It turned out that she was the model that guided him in his search for his half. And she'd never even imagined this guy could be her husband. He was a kind man, helpful, reliable, a friend at best. 2 days later, Karen left for training. At first, it was interesting their new people acquaintances. Then she felt she missed John, his masculine strength and tenderness. She wrote him a sensitive letter. She didn't get a reply and decided not to remind him of herself again. I guess the Oxys got him in over his head. And his wife has no idea that on Wednesdays her husband is in a hurry to see his beloved. John's wife Karen had quietly hated her until now, and in a way considered her to be the culprit of all her misfortunes. Had she not appeared, all would have been well. A strong relationship with John had been established. Karen felt secure around him. When his wife arrived, the gossipers immediately told her about John's love for Karen, which made the woman angry. She sent her mistress a letter in which she accused the girl of all mortal sins and called ugly words. Then Karen felt that everyone shunned her. And most of all, it hurt that John began to avoid meeting her. What's more, he made sure to send her on a course. Where was the love? And then the instructor told her he was seeing Oxy. All of this had to be endured, rethought, and resigned to fate. When Karen returned from the course, she learned that Oxy had been murdered. There was an investigation. The letter Karen had sent John had a major in state security. He was investigating a murder. Why was Oxy killed? Was it just for sleeping with her boss? Or maybe because I told him I hated her? So it was my fault. I suddenly thought, woman, Lord, forgive me and have mercy. Is it really true? In such a terrible time, it's hard to survive, not to be confused, not to make mistakes. Who is one's own and who is a stranger? The doorbell rang. Karen looked through the peephole, saw Lois, and opened the door. "Hello, I'm sorry to be unannounced," said the journalist. "Hello, come in." Lois took out a disc from her purse and handed it to the landlady. "Here's a program about you. The director has been very kind to the material." "Thank you, Lois. Why are we standing here? Come into the room, please. I'll make some tea and we'll watch and discuss your program." The woman took the disc, hiding excitement, but her hand treacherously trembled. She headed for the kitchen. Lois was squatting on the couch. She couldn't wait to get an opinion. She glanced at the bookcase and met the gaze of the young hostess from the pictures. Her eyes were smiling slyly. Lois stood up in surprise and took a few steps to change her perspective. Again, she met the same gaze. A week ago, this photo had given out very different information. She glanced into the kitchen to ask if it was the same photo or a new one, but saw the landlady watching the video intently. The old woman happened to have her laptop handy, peering at the colors of the fabric on the rug the floor had been shot with. Lois thought back to Otis. Couldn't decide whether to marry him. Good impression of his personality, interrupted by some unpleasant little details. You can't raise a grown man, you have to take him for what he is. She was at an age when her first, second, third love had faded, and she didn't want to remember it. Now she was going through a period when her soul was free from admiration for any male person. Yes, one of her partners was courting her, but he was a married man, probably just looking for fun outside the family, although quite pleasant on the outside, but at heart selfish and callous. This is evident in the way he treats his employees and his responsibilities. Otis is sincere, open, but bossy. And this is while he is not yet a husband, but only a fiancé. "Here is the tea," said the hostess, putting on the round table cups, sugar, bread with slices, sliced loaf. "Thank you. What flavorful brew do you have a secret?" "No. It's true, sometimes thyme is added. Help yourself, Lloyd." The woman sat down at the table herself. She looked at the girl, wondering how to start the conversation. "Well done, Lois, well done. I liked it." "Thank you. I'm glad I did something nice for you. Maybe you should have shown more of your suffering back in London. People live everywhere, and in London too. There were not only tragic situations, but comic ones too. Here, for example, we got gold checks, settlement for the season, bought plane tickets to go on vacation or to their relatives. And before the road day feast, in the morning they rush to the airfield by cab, and someone dove up the road, so the car will not pass. The airplane is waiting for passengers with pre-purchased tickets, and they drunkenly dig up the road. It's a laughing matter. How about we do another program about your life in London? Only in the studio, if that's possible. Some other time. What's bothering you?" Lois was surprised. "Yes, different. I don't know how people will see it." "Well, we're all about me. Tell me about yourself." "My mom was from the country too, so we are almost countrymen." "She was?" the hostess asked again. "Yes, she's dead." "Lois, tell me something more amusing. I'm getting married." Unexpectedly, said Lois, the thing she was most concerned about at the moment, and there was no one to consult. "Congratulations and good luck. I have some wine for the occasion." The hostess suggested it. "No, please don't. I was on duty today." On a day like this, you have to have a completely sober head. "Well, I won't insist." "And who is the groom?" the hostess asked kindly. "Just some strange fellow, a little younger than me." "That's no trouble, as long as the man was good." "Did you love your husband much?" "At first it was a crush, and then who knows? He was so unstable, just a ball of mirrors. Of course, he suffered humiliation, hunger, cold, fear of death, illness. Not many people come out of prison a winner. Sometimes I thought he hated the whole world. I couldn't cure the disease. How scary? Scary isn't the right word. Terrible. He was a conscripted man who was taught from a young age to live by orders. Such people are very badly oriented in life. Where does your fiancé work? Lois looked at her hostess confusedly, hesitating to open up. Then she said, "The police." Karen shook her head sadly. Policemen have to get married too. What kind of man is he? The kind of man who came saw one. God bless you. I myself have missed happiness somewhere, but I've lived through both loved ones and enemies. I haven't made up my mind yet. I can change my mind. Women sometimes marry to have a child. It's a powerful natural instinct, and love is just a fairy tale hot bird. But I wish you happiness, and I want to give you a little present. The hostess went into the kitchen and in a minute returned with a small teapot, the sides of which were painted with a pattern in the form of pine branches. Take this little teapot as a keepsake, Lois. I brought it back from London. When I die, you will look at it and remember me. No, Karen, you need it yourself, said Lois. Take it. I want you to remember me. Thank you. I'll never forget you. By the way, this fiancé of mine has a real connection to my work too. I interviewed his father once, and he remembered me and found me. He's a determined guy, and everything's gonna be okay. Those words reassured the girl. Lois got up from the table, thanked the hostess for the treat. She headed for the exit, as she really had to hurry. The woman escorted her to the door. Karen watched the program avidly, paused once more, listening to Lois's voice on the screen. And you know how terrible, bitter, and offensive it is when you are young, full of strength and desire to work. You had what worked for the good of the motherland, innocent of anything, are imprisoned for 10 years. But it can be even more agonizing to experience liberation when you feel rejected, thrown out of life, and no one needs you. They wouldn't take you to work, met with arrogant stares. That's how she is our heroine today. Karen wiped her tears and looked out the window, as if she could see something important behind the glass that would bring peace to her soul. But the memories came back to life, tugging at her soul. She tried to calm herself, realizing that unnecessary worries would only raise her blood pressure. So she looked again. Why did they brand me as a dangerous social element, a traitor to the motherland? It's hard to understand. Some comrade was fulfilling a plan. In my love note, addressed to one man, saw signs of spy activity. Until the last moment, I could not believe that I was awarded 2 medals and an order. At that time, an FSB employee would be thrown in prison for 10 years. Karen smiled contentedly and thought that here she was well out of it, did not move her heartstrings. What was the point of going back? The lingering pain of sometimes not having the strength to just live. My God, what had I wasted my life on? What was I striving for? Wouldn't I have been better off staying in a regular job, marrying the same Alex, having tons of kids and waiting for grandchildren? She asked herself, would I have been? Alex was killed because he was hiding from prison in the woods. The doorbell rang long and demanding. Usually it was Karen's sister who rang that way. I went to open the door. Neely stood on the landing, heavy, leaning on her cane. Jesus, how on earth did you manage to waddle up on 3 legs? You're not going to. What do you do here all day? I'm never bored with myself. Come in, Neely. The dense and clumsy sister stepped cautiously across the threshold into the room and resigned herself to a chair. I shouldn't have come. You were afraid I might die of curiosity. Oh, Karen, our years are such that we're as badly hurt by sorrow as by joy. I think I'll come to you. I haven't seen you in ages. You've come and done well. Do you want something to eat? No, I don't want anything. Just some cold water from the kettle. First dries up the damn diabetes. The hostess brought from the kitchen a cup of water and a plate on which lay 3 apples. Neely emptied the cup and wiped her lips with the palm of her hand. How are your children, grandchildren? Karen asked her sister. Cholera's not taking them. They need us while they're little, and when they're older, they don't need a mother. Don't say that, Neely. I'd like you to experience my happiness. The man was a drunkard. The eldest son was good at it. The grandkids are so inconsiderate and indifferent. I'll tell you one thing. We live only under our feet. Am I disturbing anyone? asked the landlady. The young have their own lives, and we have ours. Although I am 6 years older than you, I don't consider myself an extra on this earth. Neely was silent, touched the lace napkin on the table, raised her eyes to the young photograph and sighed. Of course, you can't go to the grave alive. The mistress looked carefully at her sister and only now noticed how old she had become. Bags under her eyes. She was floating. What's the matter with you? Tell me, what's wrong? The younger sister shook her head contritely and spoke softly. It happened 100 years ago. There's no fixing it now. Let's have lunch. I have some chicken broth. Karen offered. Thank you. I don't feel like it. You've always been a model for me. I was far from you. And you had money. And you had lovers, not like me. I don't know what you're getting at. The landlady's worried. I don't know how to tell you. Tell it like it is. Neely looked at her sister warily. Something kept her from speaking frankly, as if she were afraid to confess something to herself. Well, you don't have to say it. What secrets we old people can have, said the landlady. I want to go to the Father and repent for our common sins. I don't understand, said the elder sister. What do you mean? Remember when you and I used to make lists of criminals? Everyone who was in the gang? So what? They were criminals. You know what was waiting for them. Neely shuddered like she was out of breath, wiped her face and her eyes filled with tears. It was so necessary then. People are divided into their own and strangers. Bandits are the enemy. They had to be destroyed before they destroyed us. No one can blame me for that. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. All my illnesses and misfortunes are because of these sins. Your illnesses are from old age, and you're unhappy because you've lived with a drunkard all your life and your children have fallen for him. Who should they take an example from? Why didn't they take an example from me? No, you won't convince me. Neely shook her head. Do you know whose granddaughter that journalist is? Who made a hero out of you? What difference does it make? No, listen to me, Neely insisted. It's the granddaughter of that professor who was going after her. What do you want from me? Angry? She asked. I just wanted to say nothing. This program says hello to you from Anthony. Karen's face was suddenly covered with red spots. She sat down on the couch and felt like she was going to faint, leaned sideways and ducked her face into a small pillow. Neely rushed to her sister and turned her face up, asking, What's wrong with you? With trembling hands, the younger sister pulled a valuable out of her purse. She wanted to put it in her sister's mouth, but saw that she didn't react to her voice. She turned to the phone to call an ambulance. While the cardiology team arrived, Neely splashed her sister with cold water and alcohol and whiskey and called out to her and repented and cursed herself for starting a conversation about Anthony's main enemy, who had promised to get the false cleaning lady who had betrayed him and put him in jail from the other side of the world. Karen never came to memory. The medics measured her blood pressure, took a cardiogram, recorded the necessary data of the patient, asked what caused the seizure. Neely lied that the sister felt sick suddenly for no reason. The nurse gave a few injections, and the patient opened her eyes, examined those present. How are you feeling? Asked the doctor. Fine, she replied. My God, how did you scare me? Rejoiced the younger sister, seeing that Karen had recovered. Help me up. Neely, Alex is here for me. Alex who? The guest asked in surprise. It's the doctor. Come on, Alex, we haven't seen you. Neely, in a voice that was breaking into crying, quietly asked, Do something, please. She's delirious. It looks like a stroke, the doctor said. We need to get her to a hospital. Can I come with you? Neely asked. I'm her sister. Why would you want to go? They're taking her to the ICU. They don't allow visitors. When she's better, you can come and see her. Karen was carried out on a stretcher. Neely was left alone in the empty apartment, guiltily. Thought not in vain our Father said that for the sin of the dead from the other side of the world will avenge. Never complained, never hurt, and then suddenly, Lois got married. The newlyweds had a modest celebration in a restaurant and then began to live together. Lois took her marriage with a certain degree of irony and absolute calm. Now it has become fashionable to try oneself in marriage. If life together doesn't work out, you can get a divorce, a small loss. One does not know where to look for that love in the world. Maybe this is it. You just have to look harder. With Otis was easy for her, and it just seemed that he was ready to fulfill her every wish. though she didn't express any particular whims. There was not enough time to travel. Writing scripts, shooting took time, strength, and soul. In addition, Otis was often on duty on holidays. They rarely saw each other. Sometimes Lois even began to miss him somewhere on the road. Otis often had to cook his own meals, clean the apartment, and even do his own laundry. Only when I went on maternity leave, took care of the household, and noticed that her beloved husband, sometimes for 3 days, does not come home. Everyone conducts some kind of operations and raids. One day, going to wash his militia shirt, she checked his pockets so as not to ruin any papers or money. She found a picture of Otis holding a naked girl in his arms. Lois's hands shook with surprise and sweat beaded on her forehead, as if she had touched someone else's nasty secret without permission. She tossed the photograph away from her like a snake and then began to stomp on it with her feet. The baby moved beneath her heart, and she tempered her anger. Went and lay on top of Tris, feeling an unbearable burden come over her heart, and so she lay there, not getting up until late in the afternoon, when Otis came in, revived, cheerful. "What's this?" Lois asked, pointing to a photograph lying on the floor in the middle of the room. "And this, I told you how I caught the mermaid." Otis laughed nervously, quickly picked up the picture and hid it in his pocket. "Don't lie, you didn't tell me anything." "Remember about the mermaid?" "I have a good memory. That never happened." "You don't remember? Then listen to me. One night the surgeon and I were walking along the waterfront. We heard someone in the dark. We thought it was a drowning victim. I jumped in the water and pulled out a naked girl. Turns out she'd gone for a swim, but didn't have her swimsuit on. The surgeon took a picture of me. And now you're on 24-hour shifts with this mermaid?" "Lloyd, but it's nothing serious." Frustrated, Otis began to justify himself. "We just know each other, that's all." "Why you want to know her?" "No reason. You're married. Where's your love?" "At the bottom. You saved a mermaid, and now you go to her to cast a net. What do you care about me? I can't sleep with you now. We're protecting our future son. She's free. All men do that." "Go away. Get out of my sight," screamed Lois, feeling that the world was collapsing, turning into chaos. The girl gave birth to a stillborn premature baby. As soon as she was discharged, she went to the gravesite. It was early spring. Lois cried long and quietly, standing over a tiny hillock of earth. To the unbearably happy singing of the birds, Tom was written on the wooden cross. The date of the child's birth and death matched. A stillborn love had brought a stillborn child. Bitter, Lois thought, "It's all my own fault. If I had loved him, I could have forgiven him. As I had nothing, I still have nothing. And I never want to see him again. My son, forgive me. I'm ready to give you my life, but you don't want anything. What a terrible punishment I've given myself." She crouched down, touched the damp soil that instead of diapers now enveloped her child, and a sharp pain pierced her heart. A wobbly gate. Lois walked toward the gate, passing many graves. 1,000 deceased looked at her from the pictures, with a mute reproach that she did not save her son, did not bear him, did not give him the opportunity to live in the white world, to say his first word in life, "Mother." Her son remained among these strangers' graves, among strangers' souls. Oh, powerless, immeasurably grief-stricken Lois entered her room and was surprised to see Otis. "Hey, why didn't you wait for me?" he asked unhappily. "I came to pick you up, and they told me you had already checked out and left." Lois silently threw off her coat and sat down on the sofa, closing her eyes. "You don't have to show me your grief. I suffer angrily too," Otis said. "It was my son." She looked at Otis with hatred and asked, "What are you doing here?" "What do you mean?" He was surprised in the most direct sense. "I live here as your husband. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. I ask you to leave me forever and stay out of sight. If I leave, it's for good. That's all I expect from you. I love you. I think I do too. But I've run out. It's over. Maybe you'll have more of that scarce substance for a mermaid." Otis suddenly dropped to his knees, grabbed Lois's hands, started kissing them and saying something incoherent and meaningless. She broke free in disgust, pushed him away and screamed, "Leave me alone, I beg you. I cannot bear your presence near me. I'd rather go to my grave with my son than share a bed with you. You can understand that. You have postpartum psychosis. You're smart and sober, guided by your ugly mind. I'm a person, not a thing you want to control. I am you. I wanted to love you as a man and respect you as a person, as a human being, Lois said. And you're just a common male, ready to plant your ugly seeds wherever you want. Walk on by. I won't forgive you for that, replied the man. Lois, you are right in front of him and shouted, You killed your son. Now kill me. Otis jumped out of the room, slamming the door hard. Lois locked the door, lay down on Tris, and sank into a heavy count. It was something between sleep and death, with the body able to hear every sound but unable to move. For months, Lois existed in a depressed state. Nothing interested her. Her colleagues, sympathizing with her distress, didn't bother her too much with complaints, and she could hardly understand their discontent or friendliness. Her soul sank into the mire of heavy repairs so that she would not feel the acute pain of losing a child. From the others she withdrew. The summer was over. September began, and there was still an unaccustomed heat outside, as if nature too had slowed down the running of time. Only when one September morning Lois was suddenly shocked to notice that one branch of chestnuts had blossomed outside the window. Something stirred in her soul. It came alive with surprise and joy. Green prickly balls of fruit were hanging from the tree and flowers were blooming. It was incredible. Lois looked closely at the flowers and whispered, The chestnut tree bloomed a second time, and I can do it. I must live. This incident woke Lois up, her soul infused with strength. She took her camera, took some pictures, wrote a post on her page. This is the most amazing news. For the second time this year, the chestnuts have bloomed. White flowers give people beauty. Let's reciprocate them. The director smiled and was happy to see his subordinate's face light up. I'm sorry, I haven't been doing a good job lately. It's fine. Lois, I'm completely satisfied with the scripted work. Let's get back on the air. You spoil me. I respect that. I'm looking forward to the new material. I'll work it off, you'll see. Nadezhda came back to me today, the woman replied. Lois went into her office, took the materials for last year, unfolded and saw about Katerina and realized, it's been so long and I haven't even called her once. How's she doing? Lois pulled a notebook out of the drawer, found the phone number. She called, asked for Karen. An unfamiliar female voice said she didn't live here. The journalist went to the city information office, where she was told that Karen had died. This news planted a feeling of guilt in her heart. She imagined that the woman had needed someone's help before she died, and she, Lois, had not even thought of her. She felt a kinship with the old woman. What could be done for her now? Bring flowers to the grave. They would wither quickly. The memory of a person must not be seen or heard. The solution came instantly. We need to find Karen's investigative file and tell again about this woman. Lois asked the director to write an application to the regional department of the FSB with a request to allow her to familiarize herself with the case. The chief promised to help, and in the meantime told her to go to the opening of the store to prepare material for the program. Life went on. The girl went out into the street. She decided not to take the trolleybus, but to walk. At one store, people gathered for the opening. People were eager to be the first to enter the premises. Among several policemen who had been sent to keep order, Lois saw Otis, and hatred and disgust stirred in her heart. She didn't want to face him. She stopped at the kiosk and watched the store from afar, waiting for the opening ceremony. Lois, trying not to catch Otis' eye. Together with people, she entered the premises and watched as the first visitor was handed a coffee maker, walked around the sales area, looking at the appliances with excellent design. Things attracted her eyes, pleased and surprised her. Suddenly, the figure of Otis appeared in front of her. "Hello, my love," he said quietly. She answered nothing, turned abruptly and walked toward the exit. He tried to delay. She broke from his embrace and threw threateningly, "Don't get into a scandal. Look, you're my wife." "I hate you," Lois replied, "and there'll be a divorce. Don't worry. I just haven't gotten around to it yet." And the woman ran for the door. Her heart, it was pounding. It was ready to burst. She wanted to get home and be alone. She got into a cab, and in 10 minutes she was home. She took the teapot Karen had given her, poured a handful of brew, and poured boiling water over it. Waiting until it steeped, she poured herself some tea. She tasted it and thought that the hostess had a more flavorful drink. A few days later, The FSB said that it had received permission to examine the case. This news made the journalist very happy. She immediately called the employee and went to the archive the same day in the afternoon. A young man sitting on the watch himself called the archives clerk on the telephone and told Lois to wait a little while. She sat down on one of the chairs against the wall and watched the young male journalist scurrying back and forth along the corridor. They all seemed to be secret agents who walked the streets, listening to people's conversations and then drawing conclusions about the state of society. However, she thought, journalists do the same thing. They meet people and draw their conclusions. A short, thin girl with thin features came up to Lois, smiled politely, and invited her into an empty room where there was a table and 2 chairs. The girl placed a not very thick folder in front of the journalist and said, "Please read it, but these documents cannot be used in the broadcast." Such a warning made Lois a little embarrassed. However, since it was most important for her to know the true facts now, she was cunning. "All right, I'll use them to write a work of fiction." Lois opened the folder and started reading the investigation file. A certain major reported that he had reviewed materials on Karen's criminal activities. Further reported was vague evidence of a connection to the criminal group she had been embedded as an agent in. Lois was stunned by what she read, that this was a trumped-up case, and why would she get involved with gangsters when she held an important position? This was nonsense. She delved deeper into reading the case. Next was the search report, which listed the individual belongings of the arrested woman. Included were a passport, 2 medals, an order, photographs, and letters. Lois asked where these things might be. The girl only shrugged her shoulders. The journalist delved into reading the interrogation report. It turned out that Karen, shortly before the arrest, threatened to plant letters with aggressive content. The question posed by the investigator, "Who could make threats against you?" The defendant answered that no one threatened me personally. Attached to the interrogation report were letters in block letters that read, "Death to the hired evil. Karen, you will die. Hello from Anthony. Remember more, Anthony." Lois read the notes and shuddered. The last name was her father's. There was no need to look into it anymore. She'd been in charge of her own affairs for a long time, but it was painful that heart for the cat squeak. In a letter to her friend, Karen spoke openly, nothing to convince her of a lie or a crime. "Chris has decided to write you a suicide letter. Yesterday, I was summoned to the state security authorities and interrogated for a very long time. It seemed to me that I was suspected of being associated with criminals. What a mistake. What a horror. They think I'm lying. I'm not telling the truth. I swear I had nothing to do with this case. I don't know anything. I was very proud of my position. I served my country. I'm working now. As far as strength goes, and suddenly find yourself under suspicion of your own." There were many such cases in London. By the time they find the guilty party, it'll have 5 innocent people in jail. I decided to commit suicide. How did you want to live and work? I wish you success in work and life. I'm 31 years old, and because of some stupid joke, I suffer and die. My dear Chris, it's not my fault at all. I have no connection to anyone. I realize there's a lot of tension in our neighborhood. Gangsters robbing stores, killing people. But can you imagine me in their ranks? I love my homeland so much. With deep respect and heartfelt greetings to Karen. I want you to remember me from this letter." Lois realized that the woman was indeed on the verge of suicide. An unfair accusation, a lie. All of it demanded a protest. The only thing she could do was to kill herself, to remain a mute reproach to her executioners. The journalist introduced the young Karen. Her fear and shame at the untruth of Lois's sincere sympathy made it hard to breathe. Like when she stood over her son's grave, as if she had experienced another loss in her life. But she overpowered herself and turned another page where she read another letter. It was a desperate and hopeless cry of the soul. "Dear Daddy and little sister Naylee, I want to let you know that it wasn't my fault. My family. This event is like a thunderclap to me. I've never done anything to hurt anyone, only you know me. I had a good job, and I was always on the money, satisfied with the position, beautifully dressed and proud to work in a responsible service. It's all gone irretrievably. I'm gone. Your daughter and sister, I choose death not to tolerate distrust and contempt. My dear, dear ones, do you feel how hard it is for me now in my dying time? Painful? Terrible. I wish you all the best in your life and work. Hugs and kisses for the last time. Don't cry much. Bury next to Mom. Love your daughter and sister Karen. Lois read the pages and imagined what young Karen had experienced 50 years ago with sympathy. She was so excited that her own misfortunes seemed to be pushed aside. Lois turned another page, started reading, and couldn't believe her own eyes. In yet another interrogation report, Karen was confessing to her association with criminals. She had been forced to take the blame. Why had she done that? Lois, reading through the text, searched for answers. She needed to understand it in order to write the truth about the woman who entered her life and even after her death continued to exist by her side. The journalist read through dry protocols and references. She had lost her sense of time, but the archives employee reminded her that the workday was ending. Now, Lois asked, preferably. Pity. Can I come in first thing tomorrow morning? Please come. Lois closed the folder with regret. She didn't want to say goodbye. Somewhere in there, perhaps at the very end, lay the solution to the mystery of Karen's life that she had probably never revealed to anyone. Familiarity with the case was useful for the journalist also because she saw for the first time how far the story may be from the original document. By the way, the document could be fabricated, and the true essence of the case could be hidden somewhere between the lines. The next day, Lois woke up earlier than usual and immediately felt a slight anxiety and impatience in her soul. As it happens before an important and very desirable meeting, usually she liked to lie in bed, thinking about what she had to do for the new day. Today, she got up at once and started to get ready for the archives. Lois went into her old room, threw off her jacket, sat down at the desk and unfolded a folder in one of the interrogation reports. She read Karen's explanation of her association with criminals. She'd done it to make a better life. It was a ridiculous and naive explanation, since the woman was of the upper management, made good money, and was dedicated to the service. Understandably, the investigators did not believe these explanations, and so continued to search among acquaintances for those witnesses who knew more about her past, whether she was connected with gangs hiding in the forest and hatching plans to sell drugs. These witnesses turned out to be former employees. With interest, Lois read the memoirs. Karen was far from being a naive girl, able to stand up for her rights and manipulate people. Lois was very pleased when she found between the pages of the folder a small notebook that belonged to the woman and greedily copied with her eyes in a line of names, addresses, dates. All about the bandits. As she read the entries, Lois involuntarily thought, was Karen so sure of herself that she wrote down such information? The journalist continued reading further. I feel awkward about reading someone else's diary entries without permission. But the owner was already in another world, and in this world, there were only a few pieces of information about her, and Lois wanted to know them. She kept reading. It's been years, no good changes in my life. How hard it is for me to live in the world if there is no one to love from a friend, no one to share my joys and worries with. Karen wrote. That's where the entries cut off. Obviously, for young Karen, personal life was more important than work and success in the service. The cause of her unhappiness was her desire to find love in a male environment. But she was no longer a girl to fall in love with the first man she met. She chose the best of the best. Obviously, there were obstacles along the way that brought the life disaster that the woman experienced. The urge to be loved and to love herself and prevailed. It made one grieve. To live in hope and expectation of an unfulfilled meeting with the one and only who would pass by her side throughout her life. That's what Lois thought and felt that she would probably never know the real reason that had pushed Karen to take the desperate step of crossing over to the other side. There were fewer and fewer unread pages in the folder. The investigation was moving toward completion. It was clear from the materials that the investigators had failed to find the people who, together with the defendant, knew about her switch, then lost interest in her and took the case to court. Only at the trial, Karen told everything that had happened to her. She was eager to live, and prison was frightening. It threatened hunger and death. The confession at the trial was recorded, and Lois considered it with great interest, realizing that she was not mistaken in her premonitions. In the souls of women lives a great thirst for love, which is given by nature in order not to disappear the human race. Every word of the defendant spoke of her desire to be happy in marriage, to have a loved one by her side. With interest, Lois read the defendant's revelations and confession. Sam was my immediate supervisor. I took over the department after a successful case. It just sort of happened that he started flirting with me. One day he invited me to his apartment and suggested a relationship. I didn't agree at first, but I liked my job. I was afraid of losing it. So I agreed to be with him on the condition that no one would know about it. However, on the morning of the next day, as it happened, Sam's friend came up to me and began to reproach me for not agreeing to live with him, young and handsome. And now I would be spending my nights with an old and bald boss. I tolerated the insult. Later, I heard rumors that Sam was also dating Ains. I was very uncomfortable with that. Yeah, I couldn't tie him down. Meanwhile, everyone knew I was living with my boss. I was in a managerial position. I wanted to be an example for all girls, but it was the opposite. I thought I was doing a bad job and being kept as Sam's mistress. Soon the boss's wife arrived. It wasn't easy for me. I was saved by a course for secret workers in another city where I received a referral to study. But even there I had no peace. Although the study was interesting, I got attached. I missed him. One day I wrote him a letter. I don't know how, but this letter was found at Ains's. I left it there during one of my visits so I wouldn't have to carry it home. When I came back, the secretary told me that my letter, after someone had killed Agnesa, had gotten to the state security organs. I was generally suspected of murdering that conniving, good-for-nothing woman, but I was studying in another city at the time. That gave me an alibi. When I returned from my course, I was appointed to a new position. I was in charge of the women's department. I avoided seeing Sam, but in October he came to me and tried to ask me to visit. On October 26, I received a letter with a picture of me that my supervisor had once taken of me. The picture was drawn with lined eyes. In the letter, Sam's wife called me ugly words, humiliated me. I was having a hard time getting over it. In early November, a state security captain came up to me and offered to cohabit with him. Otherwise, he would soon kill me. He said that if there was a man, there would be an article. He also turned out to be married. I didn't know how to defend myself. I thought my head would explode from the tension. I had nowhere to hide. I remembered how I had lived in peace when I worked in a criminal gang as a maid. It was easier for me there, and I decided to use the same method to fight my failed life. The second time I got a job as an ordinary cleaner in the group, which was under development in our department. Just then, gangsters on the farm killed someone famous. All this was used against me. At the preliminary investigation, I gave false testimony that my mistress and neighbors were couriers of this gang. I did it out of fear of the punishment that awaited me. Fear is the ugliest emotion. It kills a person. And then I fell in love with the son of the gang boss. He was also showing me signs of affection. It was a quick romance, and I didn't realize I was working there. But already as my own, as a courier executor of small errands, it's my destiny to love the wrong people and then to pay for it with my life. Lois pushed the folder aside, staring out the window. She thought about how steep the path led. Fortunately, how hard it was to get to a world where people loved each other, genuinely didn't cheat, didn't bully others. She wasn't relieved to learn the truth that had landed Karen in cold London. In prison, on the contrary, it was even more difficult to sympathize with Karen's desperate act of revenge for the lies and insults to her dignity. However, the unknown Ains also died because of love, and because she wanted to survive in a cruel and unfair world. Lois remembered Otis, who came into her life as a victor, and love itself as God exists only for those who believe in it. The cross placed on the grave about the dead, the son born, crossed out all the bright feelings, and yet they had been the souls scorched to the end. She involuntarily thought of the images of literary heroines, lonely Solveig who had waited all her life for her lover, and he came to her as an infirm old man or crazy asshole who waited for her fiancé on a ship with red sails. Yes, she did, but nothing is said about how there was salt afterward in the churning sea of life. Had her prince turned into a savage monster? Who was she writing these works? Weak men, unsure of themselves, who longed to be loved simply because they were in this world. Lois leaned over the folder. Reading the materials, it was not difficult for her to imagine a closed court where all those men who had led her to this catastrophe by their treatment of Karen were not called as witnesses. There were no laws in that society that protected women's rights. The state only cared to protect itself. The court turned to the parties' arguments. The prosecutor proposed that the defendant be sentenced for criminal activity and betrayal of the homeland, a sentence of 10 years imprisonment. The defense lawyer, for his part, asked to take into account in sincere recognition of the defendant's first conviction and to impose a lower sentence if possible. Then Karen had the last word. She asked the court to take into account that she had no opportunity to get an education, but she had worked for the state for many years, putting dozens of criminals behind bars. She emphasized that she worked honestly, fulfilled all the assignments, joined the FSB with a great desire to work for the good of the motherland. After the discussion, the judge announced the verdict. Karen was found guilty, punished by imprisonment for 10 years with deprivation of voting rights after serving the sentence for 3 years. The term of imprisonment to be counted from November 8. And then there were the documents that concerned the rehabilitation of the former arrestee. The verdict of the judicial board was canceled because of absence in corroborative activity from the corpus delicti, as all confessions were given under pressure, and all members of the gang were arrested long ago. And largely thanks to the former defendant. Lois involuntarily summarized that between the trial and rehabilitation passed half a human life. And all these years Karen had lived under the sign of lies and injustice. The only consolation was that there were millions of such disasters in the world. There was only one page left in the folder, uncounted, probably due to the bad faith of some employee. Lois started reading it and realized that it was a continuation of the testimony of former FSB officers. The one listing the various assignments conducted by the department headed by Olivia. Suddenly, she caught the familiar surname Anthony from the text. It was her father's, maybe a relative or namesake. She read through the list of people who were part of Anthony's gang. She realized it was her grandfather. An unbearable revelation. It was because of her relatives that Karen had probably grabbed a lot of grief. And who knows now if it wasn't because of this thug who ironically turned out to be related to Lois. Which is what she felt when she spoke to Karen. Anthony was working boldly and brazenly, but then Karen came into his home, into his clan, and destroyed everything. It caused the destruction of his family. Karen put her grandfather's name on a list of criminals who cooperated with customs and smuggled illicit goods abroad. Lois's heart accelerated with excitement. She suddenly remembered that her father had never talked about how her grandfather and grandmother had died. They were rarely mentioned at home at all. They just said that the family was big. Not everything went well, so they died. I remember him calling him Anthony once. Lois bewilderedly reread the text 3 times and realized that fate had brought her to the FSB archive to learn the truth about the death of her relatives. She raised her eyes to the archives clerk. Lois carefully covered the unlined sheet from the archive folder with the notebook in which she had been taking notes. Then she folded it up and tucked it between the pages. Squinting, looking at the archives employee, she didn't seem to notice anything. Lois flipped through the folder for a few more minutes to put on a calm demeanor, and then she said quietly, "Thank you very much, Betty. I finished." "I'm glad our materials were of some use to you," she replied politely. "It was a pleasure to meet you. Why don't you give me an interview? Tell me about your work?" "Thank you, but I'd rather let my superiors do the interview. I am a small person here, an archival mouse," the woman replied modestly. "Thank you again and goodbye." Lois tried to leave the room as quietly as possible. Had she already decided for herself when the archivist realized that a sheet was missing? She would say she had put it in her notebook and return it. This was not the time to be imprisoned for such a small thing. There were a lot of feelings stirring in her soul right now. Karen, whom she had come to love as a loved one, had sent her grandfather, grandmother, and their children to the other side of the world, only to fulfill another mission. Relatives died a brutal and violent death. Lois's father was left an orphan and left by his distant relatives, who did not take too much pity on the child. Loaded, unbearable work. No wonder that his father, even in childhood, undermined his health. Misfortune multiplied. Lois suddenly felt the hatred of Karen, who deprived her of the family warmth, the opportunity to see her grandfather and grandmother. 2 aunts, and an uncle. God, and I still sympathize with her. I searched for the truth with indignation. Lois thought, here it is, the truth. Karen destroyed my grandfather's family just to serve, to get medals. Why do I keep running into hate when I'm looking for love? I married Otis. I wanted to have a baby, and I ended up hating him. I met a nice older woman, and I'm left with hate again. But even though she was punished for her sins, she wasn't so sorry. Though who's going to weigh human suffering? I have a life of my own. What didn't work out with Otis is explained. I just didn't get to really love him. And about the old lady, if I had met her, I never would have known the truth about my family. It turns out every negative piece of information has something worthwhile to say. She tried to stifle these bitter thoughts because she was afraid that the archives would not catch up with her and take away the cherished sheet. And so first of all, she ran to the post office and made 2 photocopies. Fortunately, however, when she came out of the post office, she did not see any pursuit. At home, Lois took out the archive sheet. She reread it again and thought it should be framed. Let everyone know that my relatives died a martyr's death, and no one has the right to insult their bright memory. Lois turned on the boiling pot and decided to make tea. She reached for the shelf where the packet of brew stood and inadvertently touched the white tea once given to Karen. It fell first onto the refrigerator, then onto the floor and shattered. Small shards scattered across the room. God forbid, thankfully, Lois thought with relief, as if relieved to be free of some burden in a life that had hung over her like a curse from birth. And she didn't realize what she'd done to people. I attract hate. I need to break this black cocoon that has enveloped me, shielded me from the best. What can happen in my life? I must forgive everyone. My grandfather, my father, Otis, Karen, and myself too. Lois couldn't even imagine that Karen was her real grandmother. Karen, during her years in the service, on assignment, she'd lived in Anthony's house, and then she'd given birth to a son, whom the bandits had taken away right after the birth and told her the child was dead. And he lived in his father's house and then miraculously ended up in an orphanage while his father was dying in prison. And they put everyone in jail then, the whole family. And even love did not prevent Karen from fulfilling her duty to her homeland.